All right, welcome to Class 7 of our CSE 104. We got a lot to cover here in the next couple of weeks to try to finish this, or else we have to go to Class CSE 105 and 106 and finish it. Okay, we're dealing with the question right now, why did God use a flood? Why not just have all the bad people die? I get asked this question surprisingly frequently, why make Noah go to all that work to build this big boat and destroy the whole world? Couldn't God just as easily say, okay, everybody die except Noah, you're okay? Interesting question. Why use a flood? Well, some points to ponder. I don't know the answer, by the way. I just give you my opinions on this. The flood left evidence. A miracle would not. That's the thing about miracles. You have no way to prove that they actually happened. It's just, you tell them it did, and then that's it. Okay. Secondly, the effects of the flood are still here to remind us. This would be a corollary to number one. The flood left evidence, but this reminds us of the judgment. And I think if we had a proper scriptural perspective on the world, you could look at fossils and see judgment of God. I mean, when you see a fossil saber-tooth, one guy told me this looked like his mother-in-law. Jeff, you might want to consider that one. Fossils, this represents death and suffering, God hates sin. Fossils represent the hatred that God has toward man's sin, and I think what's happened, Satan is using this type of thing to, he's got people's minds twisted in where they see fossils as evidence for evolution. Satan uses everything he can. He doesn't have anything original. So this reminds us of God's judgment. Thirdly, it gave them a preparation time. People could see this ark going up every day. Walk by, hear the hammer pounding the nails, and say, man, I better get right with God. So that's my take on it. The Bible says in 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse number 20, which sometime were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was a preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. So 1 Peter chapter 3 tells us that the long suffering of God was evidenced here. While the ark was being prepared, people could see. And it's demonstrated the long suffering of God. Okay, next question. Is the sun shrinking? In the early days of my seminar, I used to share something. One of the evidences for a young Earth, or a young universe at least, was the idea that the sun is shrinking. Here's the graph showing the recorded measurements of the sun in the last 160 or 70 years. The data shows that, yes, the sun is shrinking. This is from the Royal Greenwich Observatory. Now, this chart and this concept of the sun shrinking takes a lot of flack from the evolutionists. They will say, well, the sun is oscillating. It shrinks for a while and then it expands for a while. This, I think if you look at the graph, you can see, yes, that's true. The sun does shrink and expand and shrink and expand. The top number is the horizontal diameter of the sun. The bottom number is the vertical. That would be North Pole to South Pole of the sun. Because the sun, because it is spinning, is slightly bulged like the Earth is, slightly bulged. The equatorial distance is a little greater than the polar distance. So the observation is, hey, the sun is shrinking. The overall works out to be an average of about 5 feet per hour in the time it's been observed and recorded. Okay? There are a couple of problems with this. I will have to say, I'll give it a qualified yes, I believe the sun is shrinking. Okay? And I think it is still evidence that the universe is young. However, I don't use this in my seminar as in part one, as one of the evidences the Earth is young, because the jury's still out on what's causing the sun to burn. There are basically two different theories of why does the sun burn. One theory is it's just simply a ball of fire, gas burning, and gravitational collapse keeps the pressure up, which keeps the heat up. It's just so much gravity, so heavy. The pressure is enough to keep it ignited and keep it burning, or whatever. Of course, with no oxygen up there, the sun's not burning by burning up oxygen, like oxidation like we have here on Earth. The other theory is that the sun is a nuclear reactor. If the sun is burning by nuclear fusion, then it could burn for billions and billions of years with that much fuel. You figure a nuclear submarine can take a golf ball sized piece of fuel and sail around for a couple of years, before it burns it up. So if the sun is burning nuclear, though, if it's a nuclear burning, the problem is it should be producing what are called neutrinos. Neutrinos come from nuclear fusion, and they apparently go right through anything. They go all the way through the Earth. The way they tested to see if the sun is burning by neutrinos, or the sun is burning by fusion and sending off neutrinos. When these neutrinos go through dry cleaning fluid, I forget the chemical name for it now, but when they go through dry cleaning fluid, they will produce argon gas. Just one of the byproducts. Neutrino goes through and produces argon. So they took this gigantic tank and built a gigantic tank in the bottom of a mine, an abandoned mine they weren't going to use anymore in, I think, Utah or something, real deep in the mountains. They figured, okay, this is a good place to test this out, because if we're deep enough in this mine, it'll be isolated or insulated from any surface neutrinos that are being produced by nuclear reactors and stuff like that. And only from the solar neutrinos. The theory was they thought this should somehow isolate it. After several years of watching, there was an article in 1974, I think it was Scientific American, I've got the article somewhere, saying that they've been watching for several years and there's almost no argon gas being produced in this tank. So we're not sure how the sun is burning, was kind of how it ended. But so far there is no proof the sun is burning by nuclear fusion. It appears from the chart that the sun is indeed shrinking, and this does put some kind of time limit to the age of the sun, because obviously it used to be bigger. The bigger problem with this, besides just the simple diameter of the sun increasing, eventually it would touch the Earth. But that would be a long time, at 93 million miles. At 5 feet per hour, that would be the diameter changing, not the radius. So the distance between the sun and the Earth, you'd have to figure the radius as far as the distance there. Even that would be a problem. 5 feet per hour would be a problem. Go back a few billion years, it would become a serious problem. Get your calculator and do the work, and you'll find out it wouldn't take too many billion years, and the sun would be touching the Earth. The other problem, though, is if you go backwards in time and add mass to the sun is burning and losing about 5 million tons every second. That's what it's burning up, okay? As it's burning and losing this mass, the gravity that the sun has to pull on the Earth to keep us in orbit depends upon the sun's mass. If the sun were more massive, the gravity would be stronger. So if you went backwards in time and increased the sun's mass, that would increase the gravity, which would suck Earth in. So it really is a stretch to say that the sun has been burning for billions of years, and the Earth has all this time been at just the right distance for life to evolve. That's one of many stretches they have to make in their imagination. Okay, next, what about carbon dating? Does carbon dating work? Okay, first, let me explain how carbon dating works, and then I'll explain the problems with it. The Earth is surrounded by an atmosphere, and people argue about the number, but it's about 100 miles thick. Well, 100 miles on this 8,000 mile scale, 1,000 miles would be 1/8 of this, or about this far. So 100 miles would be about that far, not much, okay? It's a very thin layer of air around the Earth, but 100 miles is a lot. Meteors come in and get burned up before they hit the surface. The vast majority of them burn up in the atmosphere, and you see what we call a shooting star. Actually, it's not a shooting star, but who cares? That's another story. Anyway, Earth's atmosphere, about the highest part we can breathe is maybe 4 or 5 miles. 5 miles is a stretch. You go up 5 miles, you're on top of Mount Everest. Really tough to breathe up there. The air is so thin. 100 miles, it's real thin by the time you get out there. So, solar radiation is striking the atmosphere continually. Earth's atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, 78%, which is an inert gas, won't burn, won't support combustion, and 21% oxygen, 0.06% carbon dioxide. Now some books, if you look this up in the textbooks, some will say it's 0.03%. And some will say the oxygen is 20.9. There are various numbers here, but this is a reasonable average, okay? 0.0000765% is radioactive carbon-14, which mixes with normal carbon dioxide. See, carbon dioxide is made from carbon and oxygen. 2 oxygen molecules and 1 carbon. They get together and make CO2. Carbon dioxide doesn't seem to care if it's got the radioactive carbon molecule or the regular carbon molecule. Normally carbon is number 12. Carbon-14 has been produced by sunlight striking the atmosphere, changing nitrogen into carbon-14. It doesn't care, the molecule doesn't seem to care if it's radioactive carbon or regular carbon. Now surprisingly, there is a guy who works at a nuclear plant in Savannah, Georgia. I spoke at a church there. He said, Brother Hovind, I'll pay $1,000 to anybody who can prove carbon-14 even exists. He said, I don't think it even exists. There's no such thing as carbon-14. I mean, I haven't gotten that far in the study, but I think he's wrong, but I couldn't prove it, okay? There are an awful lot of creationists and evolutionists who would argue, oh yeah, carbon-14 is a very real thing. You just need to keep in mind there is a possibility that there is no such thing. Okay, this guy's had the offer out for a long time. Insects that are trapped in amber occasionally have air bubbles with them. The air bubbles found in amber indicate that the Earth's oxygen level was much higher than it is today. Today it's 21%. It used to be about 35% in the past, sometime in the past. The creationist says this is just before the flood came. I think that's probably correct. Okay, here you got radiation from the sun striking the Earth's atmosphere, forming carbon-14. High-speed bombardment of cosmic rays in the upper atmosphere produce fast-moving neutrons. These neutrons collide with atmospheric nitrogen, producing carbon-14. To refresh your memory in chemistry, or to teach you if you never learned it, this is called the periodic table. Notice right there is atomic number 6. If it's atomic number 6, that means it has 6 protons and 6 neutrons, which gives it a weight of 12. They only weigh the protons and neutrons. Electrons are considered 0. They're not worth anything. They're too light. So I'll blow it up for you here. The atomic weight of carbon is 12.03. The atomic weight of nitrogen is 14.01. Its atomic number in the upper left-hand corner is 7. Its atomic weight would be the 7 neutrons plus the 7 protons, total of 14, plus the 0.01 for good measure thrown in there. Okay, who cares? Sunlight strikes nitrogen, changes it to carbon-14. So it's knocking off, I forget if it's the protons or the neutrons, it's knocking 2 things off. So it's now considered carbon. I guess it must be knocking off. Let me back up here. I have to look it up and see exactly how it does it. The theory is that it knocks off either protons or the neutrons, I don't remember. Anyway, it changes it to carbon-14. Used to be nitrogen, now it's carbon. But it's a special kind of carbon. It's not carbon-12, it's carbon-14. Okay. This carbon-14 is a very unstable atom, and it begins to decay like uranium. Decays, falls apart, breaks up. Called radioactive decay. Uranium does the same thing. And you can hear it with a Geiger counter. You walk by uranium, you see the guys on the movie, you know, with click, 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 they're hearing the uranium as the particles fly off from the decay of the atom. Carbon-14 decays, and the half-life has been estimated through pretty intensive testing in the lab, and I wouldn't argue with them too much about this. The half-life is 5,730 years. It's considered the half-life of carbon-14, which means if you had a pile of carbon-14, half of it would change back to nitrogen in 5,730 years. And I'm surprised there's even an argument here. I've seen different textbooks. Some say carbon-14, when it decays, it turns to carbon-12. Other textbooks say, oh no, it turns to nitrogen. Other people say it doesn't even exist. So I guess I can't answer the question clearly, though I've read several things on it and there seems to be a conflict. Most people say it changes back to nitrogen. That seems to be the standard theory. Who cares? Anyway, during photosynthesis, plants breathe in CO2 and make it part of their body. There's the photosynthesis formula there. 6 carbon dioxide atoms plus 6 water or molecules, 6 plus 6 water molecules is going to give, in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, 1 sugar molecule. C6H12O6 is sugar. That's a simple sugar, plus 6 oxygen molecules. So plants, as they grow, they take in carbon dioxide and water from the roots and magically change it into sugar and oxygen. The oxygen is released back into the air. The plant doesn't want that. The sugar it takes and it uses that to make plant cells and leaves and roots and branches and everything else. That's its fuel in the form of sap, which is why they make maple syrup, which tastes so good. It's a very simple, good tasting sugar, basically. Now sucrose that you buy at the store, the white sugar that you put on your cereal, that is C12H22O12. That is called a compound sugar. and it's much harder for your body to digest. Honey is a simple sugar like this. Sucrose is a compound sugar. And so when you eat regular sugar, it gives you energy. However, it takes energy in order to break it apart so you can use it. So honey will give you much more energy per spoonful, much more than regular sugar will. And again, who cares? Okay. So plants are breathing in carbon dioxide. It ends up as part of the sugar molecule, which ends up in the plant cells. Animals come along and eat the plants and make it part of their tissue. During your lifetime, you have probably either eaten animals or you've eaten plants. How many have done that before? Everybody. Good. That's about all there is, right? That's the choice. You want to eat a plant or you want to eat an animal that ate a plant. Either way, this carbon-14 from the plants ends up in the food chain. You're going to eat the plant directly by eating a salad or something, or an apple or an orange or whatever, or you're going to eat the animal that ate the plant. You eat the hamburger, but what did the bull eat? He ate the plants to get there, okay? So this C14 goes right through the food chain and it ends up everywhere. The theory goes that the ratio of radioactive carbon-12 to normal, or radioactive carbon-14 to normal carbon-12 in the atmosphere would be the same ratio found in living plants and animals. Now that is just a theory. Nobody's ever proven this. So how much carbon-14 does Nick Pretzhook have in him right now? Well, probably the same that's in the air. If the air is 0.0000765%, probably the plants are the same ratio, because after all they're breathing the air. And probably the animals are the same ratio, and probably Nick is the same ratio because he has been eating plants and eating animals all of his life. So this is just an assumption. Nobody's proven this, but it sounds reasonable, and I'm not arguing it, I'm just pointing out this is an assumption. That living plants and animals will have the same percentage in them as the air contains. So since the sunlight is making this stuff all the time in the air, and it's decaying, falling apart, the amount in the air at the time the creature dies would have to be known to determine how long it's been dead. Here's how it works. When the plant or animal dies, it stops taking in new C14. So as soon as it dies, it's going to start to go out of balance with the air. The air is going to always have, in theory, the same amount, 0.0000765%. But if the animal's been dead for a while, it'll have less carbon-14 because it's been decaying like uranium, it's falling apart. So Willard Libby got the brilliant idea back in 1950 or 47 to use carbon dating to test the age of objects. He said, it'll be very simple. Since the amount in the air never changes, mistake number one, as I'll show you in a minute, and animals are eating this stuff, and plants are breathing this stuff, and animals are eating the plants, we can tell how long the object's been dead just by checking at how much C14 it has. So when it dies, C14 begins to decay. Half of it will be gone in 5,730 years. So if you check the air and find out it has 1,000 molecules of C14, and the fossil has 500 molecules, so hey, it's been dead 5,730 years. Sounds real good. It doesn't work. I'll show you. In theory, the way carbon dating is supposed to work, it never goes to 0. It goes to a half, then it goes to half of a half, which is a fourth. Then it goes to half of a half of a half, which is an eighth. And then it goes to a 16th, and then a 32nd, and then not much, okay? Since it's a random event, this molecule, it just all of a sudden, it breaks apart. It's like a box of hand grenades. You never know which one's going to go off. But there's random average is that half of them will explode and decay in 5,730 years. So if you waited another 5,730 years, you'd only have a fourth, and then an eighth, and then a 16th. Nobody's ever proven that's true either, but it is reasonable. So it's going to continue to decay. After 5 half-lives, there is so little left, you can't measure it. So 5 half-lives of, say, roughly 6,000 years each would be how long? 30,000 years. About the max you could measure with carbon dating, if it worked, was 30, 40, or 50,000 years. That'd be the most you could ever measure. So if somebody tells you, we know the Earth is millions of years old because of carbon dating, red flags ought to go up and say, beep, this guy doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. Okay? Because even if it worked, the max would be, say, 30 to 50,000 years. It'd be a good quiz question. You can put down there, Jessica. What's the maximum carbon dating would work for? Okay, so they compare the amount of C14 in the object being dated with the amount currently in the atmosphere, and they estimate how long it's been dead. Sounds good, but here are the assumptions that mess up everything. Has the amount of C14 in the atmosphere always been the same? How could you possibly know that? You can check the atmosphere today and find out how much C14 is in it. No question. They can measure it real precisely. How much C14 was in the atmosphere 1,000 years ago? I don't know. Anybody here know? Actually, Ron Cooper, check R. Cooper at archae.org. He has an interesting article that he's written on showing all the measurements that show carbon-14 has not reached equilibrium yet. Here's an analogy that'll help you understand it. If I asked you to fill a barrel with water, if I said, here's a barrel, here's your job, here's a hose, fill the barrel with water. And you don't realize it, but I've drilled holes in the other side of the barrel. So while you're filling the barrel, it's leaking. As you get up a little higher, it starts leaking out 2 holes. Get up higher, it leaks out 3 holes. At some point, if my holes are big enough and if your hose is small enough, you're going to reach a stage called equilibrium. You will never fill the barrel past that point. This is sort of like your checkbook, you know. You keep putting it in and it keeps leaking out to bank accounts. Eventually reach some kind of stage called equilibrium, right? If it's leaking out faster than you're putting it in, then you eventually will have a problem, right? If you're putting it in faster than it's leaking out, eventually you'll be a millionaire. Between those two extremes is equilibrium, okay? It's going to be put in and taken out at the same time. Earth's atmosphere is like a bank account. It's 100 miles thick. Sun shines on it while the Earth is spinning. So the sun shines equally on all parts of the Earth, in theory, you know, all the time. During the summer, of course, the North Pole gets it 24 hours a day, but during the winter it gets it 0, and so it balances out. Every square inch of the Earth should get sunlight at some time. This is producing carbon-14, which is also decaying. As soon as you make it, within 5,000 years, half of those molecules will be gone. 5,730 years. Some people argue and say, oh no, it's 5,790 years. Oh, some people say, no, it's 5620. You'll find a lot of different numbers if you research it. Okay, you'll be surprised how many numbers are out there for the estimates of what is the half-life of C14. It doesn't matter to me. They all range about 6,000 or less. Okay, so here we have a problem. Suppose we took a brand new Earth. Here I am, I'm going to pretend like I'm God. Poof, there's the Earth. Stick it out, get it going around the sun. Right away, it starts making C14 in the atmosphere. The sunlight is producing this stuff all over the atmosphere while it shines on it. At the same time, it'd be starting to decay. So basically, I'm starting to fill the barrel. Could I tell how old the Earth is by determining how long it would take to fill the barrel to equilibrium point? There's complicated formulas to do that, but if I asked you to figure out how long would it take to fill a barrel with water, I give you a 1-inch hose and I've drilled 1/4-inch holes up the side. Here's the diameter of the barrel, here's the height of the barrel. Yeah, with a little complex mathematics, you could calculate when you would reach equilibrium. Right? Same thing with the atmosphere. You could calculate the surface of the Earth, the sunlight, etc., and determine within about 30,000 years the Earth's atmosphere would equalize. That's what they did, and they said, oh, about 30,000 years the Earth would equalize, or reach this point of equilibrium. I don't remember where I got that 30,000 number. I think it was from ICR. I know I talked to Kurt Wise about it at Bryan College, and he said, yes, 30,000 is the number. He graduated from Harvard University under Stephen Gould, and even though Kurt Wise is a creationist, Stephen Gould was his teacher. I should look up, Jessica, make a note for me to find the reference for where I got that 30,000 year number, and I'll try to add it to the bottom of the screen here. I've never had anybody argue with me on that. Even evolutionists will say, yeah, that's right, 30,000, but I don't know exactly who figured it out or when. My understanding is Willard Libby, or one of the guys during that time frame, calculated the Earth would reach equilibrium in 30,000 years. So Willard Libby says, okay, we know the Earth is millions of years old. Mistake number one. So we can ignore the equilibrium problem. Mistake number two. It has now been discovered the Earth's atmosphere has still not reached equilibrium. So if there's more C14 now than there was 1,000 years ago, and we dig up a fossil from 1,000 years ago and carbon date it, what's going to happen? It's going to look like it's been dead longer than it really has been. Just simply because they had less C14 than we do now. Does that make sense? It's going to appear to have already aged. It started with less. And that's exactly what happens, okay? So the Earth's atmosphere has still not reached equilibrium. This is a rather complex proof that the Earth is not yet 30,000 years old, which I could have told them just from reading this book. Okay, it's about 6,000 years old. Which puts another crimp in the get along of those who want to say the gap theory, or the day age theory. Well, hold it, there's not enough. Earth hasn't reached equilibrium in carbon-14. Here's an oversimplification of how it works. If an animal is not even dead, it's still alive, it should give you about 16 clicks on your Geiger counter per minute, per gram of carbon. It's actually a little more complicated than that, but this will help you understand the analogy. If you're only getting 8 clicks per minute, you would say, oh, I should be getting 16, I'm only getting 8. This only has half the carbon it's supposed to have, therefore it is 5,730 years old. What if you're only getting 4 clicks per minute? It's gone through 2 half-lives. It's 11,460 years old. If you're getting 2 clicks per minute, you'd say, oh, wow, that thing is 17,000 years old. What would you do if you're checking your fossil and you're getting 2.5 clicks per minute? You simply find the place on the curve where 2.5 would be, read straight down. Very simple. If you're getting only 1 click per minute, it's 22,000 years old. Well, here are the problems. If you walked into a room and found a candle burning on a table, and I said, Daniel, when was it lit? And you said, I don't know, Brother Hovind, it was burning when I got here. Like that burn barrel stinking up the room right now, right? Out there burning. Let's do what's called empirical science. Let's measure the height of the candle. This we can do very accurately. We're going to measure the candle and say it's 7 inches tall. Okay? When was it lit? Who knows? How long was it burning before we got there? Don't know? Don't know. Well, about the only other empirical thing we can do. The word empirical means something you can measure or test or weigh. This is real science, not theoretical science, I believe or I think. I mean real empirical science. Science would probably divide into excuse me, at least those 2 categories. Empirical, things you can measure and weigh and test, and theoretical science. Okay? Let's also measure the rate of burn. Suppose it's burning 1 inch per hour. Now who can tell me when it was lit? Still can't. Why not?
How tall it was.
Good. We'd have to make an assumption. How tall was it? What other assumption do we have to make? Has it always burned at the same rate? We watched it burn 1 inch an hour. Does that mean it's always burned 1 inch an hour? How would we know that? Bottom's thicker, it burns slower. Suppose there's more oxygen in the room. There's a lot of factors could influence the burning of the candle. Okay? You dig up a fossil in the dirt. This is exactly like your burning candle. The amount of C14 can be measured very accurately. The rate of decay can be determined very accurately. But that's it. Would you know how much C14 was in the air when that animal was alive? No. Would you know the decay rate has always been the same? No. You don't know how much C14 it had in it when it was alive, and you don't know that the rate has always been the same. Just like the candle, you don't know the initial height, and you don't know that the decay rate or burn rate's always been the same. If the Bible is correct, I should say since the Bible is correct, the earth, according to the scriptures, had a canopy of water overhead. Either water or ice or water vapor, I don't know. There's clouds up there right now, and they're water vapor. Some people have argued there was no canopy. We've been through all that before. The canopy of water would block UV light. It'll allow long-wave radiation in, but it won't let short-wave radiation in. The color spectrum that we see will go right through it. The UV light would not go through water. Interesting. That would probably prevent the formation of C14. So suppose we've got an animal that's living on the earth before the flood comes. He's living under a protective canopy of water. There is very little, if any, C14 in the atmosphere. He dies, gets buried in the flood. We dig up the fossil and carbon date it. We're going to assume it started at 16. When we measure it, how much is actually going to be in that critter? Very close to 0, right? Since there's very close to 0 C14 in that critter, we're going to say, wow, let's look at the graph here. Close to 0, that thing is 30,000 years old. Right? Is it? No. It's 4,400 years old. But we assume it started at 16. And there's the problem. You don't know it started at 16. The canopy would have messed everything. The flood would have really messed up everything, changed everything around. Let me give you a few examples of how it doesn't work, and then we'll take a little break here. Living mollusk shells were carbon dated at 2,300 years old. Now, this is back in 1963. And some of the scoffers will say, well, carbon dating's gotten better since then. Well, 1971. Freshly killed seal carbon dated at 1,300 years old. So apparently it is still not working, is it? I mean, if they just killed it, hello, it's not 1,300 years old, right? 1984. It's not getting any better. Shells from living snails carbon dated at 27,000 years old. Now the skeptics will say, yeah, but we know why that date is wrong, because these snails live in a creek that's in an area with a lot of limestone, and the limestone contains a lot of carbon, and it washes into the water, and the snails are drinking this water and making it part of their tissue, so we know that date's wrong, and we know why. Okay, I understand. Then do you know the dates that are right? You know this one's wrong because you know where this snail lived. What if you carbon dated this saber-toothed tiger? Do you know where it lived? You know what kind of water it was drinking? How could you possibly know any dates are correct? When you find an awful lot of them are wrong, how could you determine which ones are right? You see the problem you got here? 1975, one part of a mammoth was 29,000 years old, another part's 44,000. Now I just ordered today Geological Survey paper 862 from the government printing office. It costs $1.75 for the paper and $5 for shipping. But we'll get it here in a few days, because one person wrote me a nasty letter and said, Hovind, don't you realize that these two dates were from two different animals? Because I did not read the actual paper yet. I will get it here in a few days. This quote is from Institute for Creation Research's book, Henry Morse, That Their Words May Be Used Against Them. And it's from, I believe this, I forget who exactly said it. So this is a secondhand quote. I didn't read the paper myself, but I'm getting it for the skeptics out there. I will look at the paper myself, and I will stop using this if it's proven to be incorrect. But this book, That Their Words May Be Used Against Them, I believe is where this came from, showed that the dates are from the same animal. In the same paper, this fellow said one part of Dima, the frozen mammoth, was 40,000 years old. Another part is 26,000. And the wood next to it was 9,000. And the skeptics will argue, well, yeah, that's because certain parts of this mammoth were contaminated because, you know, water was flowing through there and it washed out some of the C14, so it gave an older age. Okay? Then how do you know the other fossils that you dig up you have the right age for? See what I mean? You got a problem either way. 1949, when they first started doing carbon dating, Harold Anthony wrote an article in Natural History and showed how the lower leg of a mammoth is 15,000 years old, but the skin was 21,000. And the skeptics will say, oh yeah, but we've gotten better at it. I think we've shown they have not gotten better at it. 2 Colorado Creek mammoths, this Colorado Creek, Alaska, carbon dated 22,000 and 16,000. Which one's right? These mammoths are side by side. Living penguins dated about 8,000 years old. 11 human skeletons, the earliest known human remains in the Western Hemisphere, have been dated by accelerator mass spectrometer. All 11 dated at about 5,000 radiocarbon years or less. Oldest skeletons we have, less than 5,000 years old. Why would that be? There was a flood. This is not carbon dating. This is accelerator mass spectrometer dating. There's several different ways they can try to date things and see how long they've been dead. Material from dinosaur bones were dated at 34,000 years old. Normally, if you took a dinosaur bone in and said, would you please carbon date this, they would say, no, we won't do that because it's too old. It's off the chart. The chart only goes back 50,000 and this is 70 million, so it won't work. Well, how do you know it's 70 million? Try it anyway, please. Would you please carbon date it anyway for me? They just won't do it. Okay? Russian scientists, however you pronounce their names here, carbon dated dinosaur bones at under 30,000 years old. Hugh Miller had this done, Columbus, Ohio. This guy had dinosaur bones dated at under 20,000 years old, about 20,000 years old, because he did not tell them they were dinosaur bones. If he would have told them what they were, guess what number they would have come back with? 70 million, probably. All right, let's take a quick break. Come back, talk a little more about carbon dating and then potassium argon dating when we get back. Okay, let's continue now a little bit more on carbon dating. Let me read this quote to you, a very interesting story here. A geologist at the Berkeley Geochronology Center, Carl Swisher, used the most advanced techniques to date human fossils. Last spring, he was reevaluating Homo erectus skulls found in Java in the 1930s by testing the sediment found with them. By the way, let me make a comment here. Homo erectus, we covered on videotape number 2 about the big caveman, has been renamed several times. It was first called Java man, then it was called Pithecanthropus erectus, and then now it's called Homo erectus. In any case, it's baloney. Okay, it's not a missing link at all. But Dubose went to Java, which is part of Indonesia down by Vietnam, looking for missing links. I mean, that's why he went. Okay, so this guy's not a unbiased observer. He gets there. He finds a little piece of a skull cap from an orangutan, I believe it was, or an ape of some kind. He found 3 human teeth. They were not together. And he found a human thigh bone, I think it was a year later and 50 feet away. He concluded, wow, ape's skull cap, human thigh bone, this is an ape that could walk, half human, half ape. He didn't tell everybody that he also found 2 normal human skulls in the same area. He hid those under his bed, under the boards, under his floor, kind of like Telltale Heart, Edgar Allan Poe, you know. And because he knew if people found out he spent all his time over there digging in the dirt to find a dead ape's skull, everybody would think, why are you spending all your time digging in the dirt to find the dead ape's skull? You know, if you're going to spend your time digging in the dirt, you want people to think you're doing it for a good reason. You don't want people to realize how dumb you are for spending all your time digging in the dirt to find this bone. All right. So, and back to the story here. A hominid species assumed to be an ancestor of Homo sapien, which is baloney, erectus was thought to have vanished some 250,000 years ago. Again, baloney. Even though he used 2 different dating methods, Swisher kept making the same startling find. The bones were 53,000 years at most, and possibly no more than 27,000 years. A stretch of time contemporaneous with modern humans. I would like to point out, Your Honor, that this is not an exact science, okay? If you get an error of 96%, is this beyond all reasonable doubt? I'd say this raises incredible doubts, okay? How do you know either one of the dates are right? How do you know it's not 50 years old? You know, I wouldn't trust any of the dating methods any farther than I could throw them. So here he's getting 96% error. But even then, this is not what they were looking for. They were looking for 250,000, weren't they? They didn't get close. Here's what you ought to consider about carbon dating. When you date a sample of known age, like the snails or the penguins or something like that, you know how old it is. It's still alive. It doesn't work. If you date a sample of unknown age, it is assumed to work. That's silly. As elements decay, they produce helium. One of the byproducts of radioactive decay, as the molecule explodes, it sends off alpha particles or beta particles and helium. Uranium way down in the ground is decaying. This helium gets trapped. Slowly finds a little crack and works. Helium floats, you know, like we have helium gas to fill balloons with. This helium migrates around through the rocks if it can, okay, and eventually it'll collect inside a cave. If it's got a roof where it can't get through very quickly, you might go into some caves and you're walking along the cave and you happen to get into a high part, the ceiling may be full of helium if there's no circulation in the room to stir it up. So you're breathing and you start talking real funny, you better get out of there because you are no longer in oxygen. You probably have about 2 or 3 breaths and you're going to faint. You're now in helium. The miners used to bring canaries down with them when they went into the mines because the canary is very sensitive to the atmosphere and it would drop over dead if you were in an area that didn't have oxygen. Because sometimes in mines, they're digging out the coal is, you know, decaying or whatever and producing different gases that are poisonous. But, or they're just explosive, like methane or something. And they're down in this cave and this, you know, air gets trapped in these caves. I went into a big coal mine up in Birmingham, west of Birmingham. They took me down into the mine at 3 in the morning. It didn't matter, it was dark down there in the daytime too. But they had this giant fan, the biggest fan I've ever seen in my life. It was probably bigger around than this room is tall. I would say it was a 16-foot fan blade. They got this thing mounted to a big diesel engine, and it's cranking like crazy, blowing air, and it's got a big tunnel built over it down into the ground, which goes down to the coal mine. At the other end of the coal mine, 2 miles away, there's another big hole to suck air in. And this fan has a backup system, I mean all kinds of emergency bells and whistles, and if the motor goes down, another motor kicks on. That fan constantly is blowing air out, sucking air through the mine to make sure they don't get a methane buildup. And you go down in the mine and you can feel this breeze blowing all the time. I mean, this fan is incredible. We went up, you could hear this thing 6 blocks away, you know. They turned the fan on. Man, it was incredible. Anyway, who cares? This helium eventually is going to get out of the rocks, if it can, and get into the atmosphere. So the theory says the Earth is billions of years old, and there's been how many earthquakes during these billions of years? Oh, wow, there's been a lot of them, you know. As the Earth cracks and moves around and shakes, this helium is going to find a way out. It's going to get into the atmosphere. Helium, being a light gas, is going to float up real high in the atmosphere. Very little of it is able to actually escape to space, but some of it can. You know, helium can get out there to the edge and, you know, molecule just bounces off and drifts off, gone forever. After calculating all factors, how much helium is able to escape from the atmosphere? How much is being produced? There's only enough helium in the atmosphere for less than 2 million years of Earth's existence. So if the Earth has been here for 4.6 billion years, why isn't there more helium? Helium is an extremely rare gas in the atmosphere. Why isn't there a lot of helium up there? Yes, sir?
Can you expound on why very little is able to escape into space?
There's several factors that influence, like a pan of water just sitting there eventually evaporates. The molecules on the surface are wiggling around and they might get enough energy to jump up and then fall back down. And evaporation, as you add more energy, they can bounce around faster. If you really add energy, like a flame underneath, and get it boiling, now the molecules are moving around like crazy and they can fly off into space, and you can boil away a pot of water much faster than you can just watch it evaporate. The Earth's atmosphere has energy being added from the sun. This energy is moving the molecules around. Some of them get enough energy to bounce off and be lost. But you figure a molecule, you know, 200 miles from the Earth, what's the nearest body attracting it? The Earth. chances of it falling back in are very great. Whereas a molecule of water bouncing off of a pan of water gets up into the atmosphere, and now it has air molecules to move it around. So the chances of it finding the water again are slim because it's in an atmosphere. However, with Earth, you're dealing with right next to the air is space. Nothing. So it still has gravity pulling it back. You'd probably have to contact guys like ICR to get all the technical details on how they calculate how much helium can escape. Okay? Some of it can, but it's very different. It's the same principle, but it's very different numbers you'd have to use in your equation than a pan of water with molecules escaping because there's no air. One of the many factors that keeps the water from just simply flying off is air pressure. There's many factors, you know, gravity, surface tension, et cetera, et cetera. So Jonathan Sarfati, who writes a lot for Creation magazine and for creation material, and does a great job, by the way, in 1998 wrote this article, said there's only enough helium in the atmosphere for 2 million years worth. So this is, again, one of the more complex evidences that this Earth is not billions of years old. ICR has a great book on the real technical aspects of carbon dating if you want to get the go down long, you know, go down deep, stay down long, come up dry kind of arguments. This would be a good one. I've got it in my office there. Showing why the old numbers that they get from dating methods are not reliable. We all know from what we covered in video number 4, which would have been about CSE 103 early on maybe, that fossils are really dated by the strata they come from, and strata are dated from the fossils they contain. We won't review all that now, but there's quite a few quotes here about that. Geologic column is how strata or fossils are dated. Actually, no fossils are dated with carbon dating. They can only date things that contain carbon, and by the time a bone turns into a fossil, there's no longer any carbon in it because it's all been replaced by the minerals in the ground. They can only date things like charcoal or things that still have carbon in them. Wood could be carbon dated in theory. Okay? It's all based on circular reasoning. Here's an interesting quote here. In the last 2 years, an absolute date has been obtained for the Gandong beds above the Trinnell beds. It has the very interesting value of 300,000 years, plus or minus 300,000 years. Well, exactly how old is that layer? Somewhere between 0 and 600,000. I vote for 4,400. That's my vote, okay? Moon rocks were brought back, 1969, given to many different laboratories to be dated. One rock, called the Genesis rock, specimen 10017, was divided into 6 pieces and dated many times. The ages ranged from 2.5 billion to 4.6 billion. Well, Your Honor, if you're getting nearly 100% error from the same rock, how do you know any of them are right? James Dawson has a website. He was Chief of Engineering and Operations. His website, jpdawson.com. Here's his phone number, address, etc. He worked on lunar samples, including the Genesis rock. When I called him back in January 69, or 99, I said, Mr. Dawson, how old is the moon? He said, I don't know. We got numbers of 10,000 to several billion from the same rock. But after dating all the moon samples, they of course came up with a date and said, well, the moon is 3.5 billion years old, because at the time that's what they were teaching the age of the Earth was, 3.5 billion. Marvin Lubenow, in this book, Bones of Contention, have you read that one yet, Jeff? This is in the pile to be read, right? That's an excellent, excellent book. Okay.
I saw a magazine today that had the same title on it.
There are probably 100 books out there with that same title. Because that's a phrase. I have a bone of contention. It means I have an argument with you about something. There's Bones of Contention, and then we have another little magazine called, magazine format booklet called Bone of Contention. You probably ran into this making the catalog, Daniel, slight difference in title. Who cares? Anyway. He used an interesting article Marvin Lubenow has about how they change the dates whenever they need to. And it deals with potassium-argon dating. Potassium-40 is another radioactive element. It has a much longer half-life. Remember, the carbon-14 half-life is 5,730 years. This book says 5,770. Like I said, you're going to get numbers all over the scale, but somewhere a lot less than 6,000. Potassium-40 has a half-life of 1.3 billion years. Well, anybody with half a brain ought to be asking themselves the question, how do they know that that's the half-life? who watched it for 1.3 billion years anyway? Obviously, nobody did. Same with carbon. Nobody watched it for 5,000 years either. What they do, they will take a sample of the radioactive element in the laboratory, surround it by Geiger counters or photographic film or something that will record when a particle breaks up, sends off this little alpha particle or beta particle, and it'll make an impression on the X-ray film or the Geiger counter or a click or something. Through very careful testing, they can actually determine how many molecules are decaying in, say, a 3-day period. Let's suppose we take a sample of carbon-14, we put it in the machine, and we surround it by instruments that will measure how many clicks it's giving off. We know this contains 10 million molecules. 3 days later, we have counted 817 of them that decayed. So we get our calculator, 817 decayed in 3 days out of 10 billion, and they work up a formula to get the half-life. It's generally done on a 2 or 3 day sampling. I won't argue with them. They're probably right. The half-lives are probably correct. I'm not arguing with them. But I think people do need to understand it does sound a little fishy to test it for 3 days and come up with a 1.3 billion year number. That just sounds a little fishy to the average person, I think, of average intelligence. But I won't argue with them. I'll tell you, yes, your number is probably correct. However, you still have the assumptions. Has this decay rate always been the same? How much was in it when it died? The interesting thing about potassium, when it decays, it produces argon, which is a gas they use for welding. We have a tank of argon to go with our welder. You turn it on when you're welding and it does something to the weld. I don't remember what now. I don't care. But argon gas, I forget what else it's used for. It's like 1% of the atmosphere is argon, or less than 1%. So it's a pretty small amount. Potassium produces argon. And since argon is a gas, the theory goes, wow, when a volcano erupts and the lava is flowing out, since it's a hot lava, it's going to drive all the gas off. So there's a lot of potassium in lava, and since there's no argon, mistake number one, if we found a lava flow, we could tell how long it's been hardened by how much argon is in it now compared to how much potassium is in it now. Because it should start producing argon, and half the potassium is going to decay every 1.3 billion years. So this is called potassium-argon dating. They're checking to see how much potassium is in it and how much argon is in it. They're assuming when the eruption took place, it reset the clock to 0. There should be no argon. Mistake number one, as we'll see in a minute. Okay? It has been proven over and over and over and over. Potassium-argon dating does not work. However, they still rely on it. Many scientists rely on this. When a volcano erupts, it throws out a layer of ash all over the countryside. If you find a fossil under that layer of ash, in the mud or rocks or whatever, you would assume this animal died before the volcano erupted. Right? Then more layers of mud get on top of this ash, and more animals die and get buried in the mud. And then another volcano erupts, or the same volcano erupts again. New layer of ash over the countryside. If you're digging straight down through these layers of ash, if you find a layer of ash, which is called, by the way, an event horizon, this is a major event. Volcano blew up. Okay? Anything between those two layers of ash should be between the ages of that ash. So they actually date the layers of ash with potassium-argon dating, and then estimate the age of the fossils between the two dates. Like this picture here from National Geographic, 85. They show 1.8. Well, the top one's 1.4. What they're saying here is that layer of ash dated at 1.4 million years old. The next one down dated at 1.8 million years old. If you find an animal in between, what number are you going to give it? Somewhere between those two numbers, right? That's how it's done. So the ash layers are dated, and that is called an event horizon. And then any fossils under that are older, any fossils over that have to be younger. it sounds really good. Doesn't work, but it sounds really good, okay? And very convincing to the average freshman college student, I'm sure, he swallows this up whole. KBS tough, by the way, tough is a name for ash. An ash layer is called a tuff layer, okay? This is named after K. Berensmeyer, okay? K. Berensmeyer, KBS, I forget what the S stands for, K. Berensmeyer or something. The KBS tuff was named after her because she discovered this layer of ash digging in Africa someplace apparently and said, wow, let's have it dated. And since she's the one who had it dated, it got named after her. I mean, if you spend all your time digging in the dirt and all you find is an old ash flow, you got to be famous for something, I suppose. So, K. Berensmeyer they named this tuff after her. Everybody dated this KBS tuff using potassium argon dating at 212 to 230 million years old. This is from Nature magazine, April 18th, 1970. Many people would check the KBS tuff. They'd get a sample of it, and they try to get an uncontaminated sample. You know, they find the layer, dig way back into the hillside, you know, use rubber gloves and the whole thing, and try to get a sample and don't let any air touch it, and, you know, seal it up, go to the laboratory, and date it. And everybody was having a contest, who can get the closest to the exact date of this KBS tuff. Because if we know the age of that ash layer, then anything below that's older, anything above that is younger. Sounds good. Arguments raged about how old is the KBS tuff. Different scientists published papers and said, oh no, that thing is 219 million years old. Somebody else said, no, it's 229 million years old. I checked it and my way is better than your way. Okay? And they argued back and forth in the Nature publishing articles. They got to publish about something, I suppose. And the arguments, though, were within this age range, 212 to 230 million. Everybody's happy. This number gets published in numerous journals, and everybody accepts it. Till 1972, Richard Leakey came along and found a skull, a perfectly normal human skull, under the KBS tuff. Well, this is going to mess things up royal, isn't it? Because here we've been teaching everybody that man didn't evolve till 3 million years ago. How do you get a modern human skeleton under a layer of ash that's 212 million years old? Well, they'll try to find ways to make this happen. One way is they'll say, well, maybe the person was buried there. He fell into a crack and, you know, got covered up, and it looks like he's under that layer, but he really wasn't. You just found him under the layer, but he was buried there. He was put in later. I mean, people dig graves now. Dig a hole, put the person down there, right? Okay. KNMER stands for, when fossils are found, they give them a number. K is for Kenya. I forget what the other ones are for, but it's easy to look up in a book somewhere. Each of these numbers and letters has a significance for where it was found and who found it, I think. Their name is encoded in here somehow. So we find skull number 1470, normal human skull, but it's in rock that is too old. So what are you going to do with this? First they try to discredit it and say, oh no, it was not really there, it was put there later. So after everybody digs around, and the guy who's digging up these bones, of course, has to very carefully document everything he does to make sure people believe in him, you know, because somebody's going to try to prove him wrong. And finally everybody agrees, okay, he's right. This was not put in the ground. I mean, all the layers above it are undisturbed. This guy wasn't buried here. He lived here. So now you can come to two choices. Aliens visited the planet 200 million years ago, which is honestly what some people came up with. A bunch of folks said, well, this proves aliens came here. The other choice is to say, the layer's not really that old. Right? So that's what they decided to do. Well, that layer is not at old. Even though it had already been dated a bunch of times, and everybody agreed it's over 200 million years old. Because they found this skull, they're going to check it again. Suppose they had never found that skull. Nobody would have checked it again, would they? And everybody would have accepted that age. And somewhere else, somebody would find a fossil under that, and he would date it by the KBS tuff at 240 million. So this entire geologic column is all a house of cards. Everybody's date is based on somebody else's date, which is based on somebody else's date, and the whole thing's a bunch of baloney. All right? But this is how it's been constructed through the last 150 years by all of this stuff of putting these dates together. Okay. They dated the skull at 2.9 million years old. Still got a problem. So they took 10 different samples of the KBS stuff. Everybody who wanted to be famous said, I'm going to go prove the date of that. KBS is, everybody was wrong. We're going to get it right. Because I got to publish an article so that I can keep my government grant, basically is what it boils down to. So now they got 0.5 million to 2.64 million. Well, I'd like to point out two things. Number one, that is still way down from 200 million, right? Number two, they never would have redated this thing if they had not found that skull. Right? Can you see how many, is your mind racing thinking, wondering how many dates are in there that they haven't been able to, they've published them and everybody's believed them, but they haven't been able to verify them.
9,000% error factor.
That's a 9,000% error factor, but even with the two dates they did get, 0.5 to 2.6, that's a 500% error. Even the new dates are no good, right? And they call this science? That's not science, that's fairy tale stuff. So of course, everybody that had ever dated the KBS stuff before, that used to be a hero, wow, he got it right, he was 218 million, you know, now all of a sudden he's a villain. Why didn't he catch that back then? And they've got a whole list of excuses they can reach in and grab which one of why they got the wrong date. Well, it was contaminated, he didn't have accurate equipment, he didn't know what he's doing, he didn't graduate from the right university, or whatever. You know, I'm sure they got a whole list of excuses they'll pull out. Back in 1770, George Buffon was one of the guys who began teaching the Earth is older than 6,000. See, when Darwin's theory came out in 1859, Darwin was in the middle of an era that had already been teaching for nearly 100 years that the Bible isn't right on the age of the Earth. People already believed in evolution way before Darwin, but they didn't know how it happened. Darwin just simply gave them a mechanism. Here's how it worked, folks. Oh, wow, thank you, Darwin. You explained it to us. Okay? That's why Darwin is treated like God. Back in 1770, George Buffon said the Earth is 70,000 years old. In 1905, in Newsweek magazine has the article about it, the official age of the Earth was 2 billion years old. If you get some old textbooks from the early 1900s and look up the age of the Earth, it'll say the Earth is 2 billion years old. When they went to the moon, 1969, here's an article from the newspaper, Minneapolis Tribune, August 25th, 1969. The article said, study shows moon rock to be 3.5 billion years old. The official age of the Earth and the moon was 3.5 billion when I was in high school. There it is. Look at the circle on the far right. It was possible to estimate the age of these extracted samples in terms of the extent to which radioactive potassium-40 had decayed into stable argon. It is largely through measurement of the extent of this slow decay process that scientists are able to determine how long it has been since a rock was last heated by volcanic activity or other processes. See how it's done? So they said the rock is 3.5 billion years old. That's the last time the moon was heated and the argon gas escaped. It reset the clock. Yeah, right. Today, students are taught it is 4.6 billion. I saw a book recently that said it's 4.65 billion. Guess what? They're trying to add a little more, aren't they? Well, I calculated the Earth is getting older at the rate of 21 million years per year for the last 220 years. That's 40 years per minute. We're aging rapidly, folks. Okay? Here's some things to consider about carbon dating. Wild dates are often obtained. Dates that don't fit the evolutionary theory are rejected and not published. Correct dates that get published match the geologic column. So why did you date it to begin with? You already think you know how old it was based on your geologic column. Why are you doing it with carbon? Why check it with carbon dating? It's based on the assumption that the original content of the sample is known. It's based on the assumption the decay rate never changes, based on the assumption the sample has not been contaminated. I would like to point out, just by way of passing here, all these decays. Potassium decays to argon. Uranium decays to lead. All of the decays are elements going downhill on the periodic table, not uphill. So if the Big Bang made hydrogen, how do you move uphill to get to uranium so that it can start decaying back down? Something just to consider. Basalt, which would be from a volcano, lava flow, from Mount Etna in Sicily in 122 BC when it erupted. When they took samples of this basalt and potassium argon dated it, they said it's 250,000 years old. Well, now hold it. We know it's only 2,000 years old. Why would it give a potassium argon date of 250,000 years? Well, suppose some of the argon is leaking out. They're checking the potassium compared to the argon, and if the argon's leaking, you're going to get an old number just because it's leaked out. Hawaiian lava flow 1801, when it erupted, they knew it erupted 1801, it was a historical observation, gave a potassium argon date of 1.6 million years old. And they'll say, yeah, we know some of these dates we get are wrong. Okay, well then how do you know any of them you get are right? I mean, can you see how much fun a lawyer would have with this in a court of law? Your Honor, he's guessing. This would never hold up. Okay? Basalt from Mount Kilauea, however you say that. They pronounce every vowel over there in Hawaii. Kilauea, Kilauea-iki, something like that. However, since 1959 it erupted, gave a potassium argon age of 8.5 million years old. They know it's only 40. Mount Etna erupted again in 1964. New lava flow. Hey, let's check it again. Okay, 700,000 years old. Erupted again in 1972. Gave an age of 350,000 years old. New lava dome building inside Mount St. Helens. It erupted in 1980. New lava oozed up. People thought it might blow again, and then it quit. Ran out of pressure. They said, wow, brand new lava, let's go check it. How old is it? Well, they tested it several different ways. The whole rock, the feldspar, different ways they did it. Stephen Austin works at ICR, does a great job with this kind of thing. This is in the technical journal, Creation Ex Nihilo Technical Journal. It gave ages from 0.35, that would be million years, so that's 350,000, to 2.8 million. This is from the same rock. I think they don't know. That'd be my guess on it, right? So same thing, potassium argon, you date a rock of known age, it doesn't work. If you date a rock of unknown age and no other way to check it, it works. It's ridiculous. And same things to consider for potassium argon dating. You don't know the decay rate, you don't know that it's not been contaminated, you don't know anything about it, basically. Okay, fresh dinosaur bones, have they been found? I get people say about, oh, Hovind, you're lying, they never found any fresh dinosaur bones. Well, in the book, The Great Alaskan Dinosaur Adventure, published by Master Books, 800-999-3777, they've now changed their name to New Leaf Press, and Master Books is a part of New Leaf Press. This is in Arkansas. This book tells the whole story about how they collected unfossilized dinosaur bones. They had not fossilized yet in Alaska. Frozen bones. Some were petrified, some were lightweight. Journal of Science, December 24th, Christmas Eve, 1993, reported on the amazing preservation of the bones of a young duck-billed dinosaur found in Montana. Under a microscope, the fine structure of the bones was seen to have been preserved to such an extent that cell characteristics could be compared with cells of chicken bone. Finely preserved dinosaur bone. In northwestern Alaska, 1961, a geologist found a bed of dinosaur bones in unpermineralized. That means they weren't fossilized. How can the bone not fossilize in millions of years? A young Inuit Canadian Eskimo was working with scientists from Newfoundland's Memorial University, 1987. On Bylot Island, he found a part of a lower jaw of a duck-billed dinosaur. It too was in fresh condition. had not fossilized. This picture shows a dinosaur supposedly with a heart in it. It's rare for soft tissue to fossilize, okay, but it can. Usually only bones fossilize. Soft tissue can fossilize. This is from Time magazine for kids, this picture, April 27th of the year 2000. Scientists say they found a dinosaur heart. So then they went further and said, wow, it's a 4-chambered heart. How are you going to tell that? The thing's a rock, okay? They did x-rays and CAT scans and said it's 4-chambered. The argument has always been, if birds turn to dinosaurs, dinosaurs turn to birds. Most reptiles have a 3-chambered heart. All birds have a 4-chambered heart. Blood circulation is totally different in those two types of hearts, okay? On the human body, the blood comes into your heart from the body, which has used up all the oxygen. They call it blue blood, okay? Or it's not really blue, but it's bluer. Then it goes to a second chamber, which pumps it out to the lungs, gets oxygen, comes back into a third chamber to receive it from the lungs, puts it over to the fourth chamber, which pumps it back out to the body. You have 4 parts to your heart. That's why you hear your heart beat, boom, 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 boom. That's the different valves opening and closing, you know, moving the blood around. Okay, who cares? Reptiles have a 3-chambered heart, most of them. Birds have 4. With a 3-chambered heart, the blood comes in and it gets mixed, half of it from the lungs and half of it from the body. So it's always only half oxygenated, which is why reptiles are a little slow, you know, when it gets cold. One of many reasons why they're a little slow when it gets cold. And they don't have the energy for long-distance, high-speed chases because they would run out of oxygen in their tissue. Whereas a mammal with greater oxygen in their blood has, you know, different long-term endurance kind of stuff. Birds have to fly, which takes a lot of oxygen. They couldn't do it with a 3-chambered heart because that system simply wouldn't supply enough. Okay, next week we'll take up with some more questions and try to get as far as we can on our frequently asked questions section. So we'll see you then. All right, well, welcome to class number 8. We have 2 more after this, and we are going to try to finish up. At the rate we're going, we will not make it, but we shall hurry. We're taking our questions and answers, frequently asked questions, things that come up in our seminar. People say, well, if the dinosaurs lived only a few thousand years ago, or some are still alive, do we ever find any fresh dinosaur bones that are not fossilized? Yes, some have been found. If you get the book, The Great Alaskan Dinosaur Adventure by Buddy Davis, who works some with Ken Ham up in Cincinnati area, great ministry there called Answers in Genesis. He's got a book called The Great Alaskan Dinosaur Adventure. On page 87, it tells about them when they went to Alaska and found dinosaur bones that were frozen back into digging back into the bank of the riverbed. Journal of Science, December 24th, 93, report the amazing preservation of the bones of a young duck-billed dinosaur found in Montana. Under microscope, the fine structure of the bones was seen to have been preserved to such an extent that cell characteristics could be compared with cells of chicken bone. Very well preserved. In Alaska, in 1961, a geologist found a bed of dinosaur bones in unfossilized condition. Not fossilized. They cannot possibly be millions of years old. A young Inuit, as a Canadian Eskimo, working with scientists from Newfoundland's Memorial University in 1987 on Violet Island, found part of a lower jaw of a duck-billed dinosaur. It too was in fresh condition. This article in Time magazine for kids on page 7 of April 27th, 2000 shows the kids that they found a dinosaur fossilized dinosaur with a fossilized heart in it. Now there has since been some real controversy about this, of whether that's even a heart or not. One of their arguments was, yes, it's a heart, and yes, it's a 4-chambered heart. Well, now, hold on a minute. We're not even positive it's a heart, okay? Very rare for soft tissue to fossilize. It can happen, but it's very rare for that to happen. I'm not saying it's not a heart. I just don't think it's been demonstrated conclusively that it was, except to those who really want to believe that dinosaurs turned to birds. Since birds have 4 parts to their heart, almost all reptiles have 3-chambered heart. We talked about that before. The blood circulation through the lungs and everything is totally different in those types of animals. How it could possibly survive a transition from 3 to 4, nobody's ever demonstrated that. It's just pure theoretical. Okay, here's a good question I got one time. If there really was a flood, where are all the human bones? Good question. All right, here's my answer to that one. Marvin Lubenow, who wrote the book Bones of Contention, excellent book, by the way, we have it in our bookstore. He said there have been about 4,000 human remains found. Some are very, very fragmentary, just a few small pieces, some very complete skeletons. Trillions of fish fossils are found, probably billions of plant fossils are found, and yet only about 4,000 human fossils. Why? Well, when God created the world 6,000 years ago, it was full of plants and full of animals, but only 2 people. God didn't make 2 chickens. He made a world full of animals, which would include probably millions of chickens and millions of cows, and all the animals were made, but only 2 people were made. So when Adam and Eve were standing there in the garden, it's full of trees and full of animals, but they're the only 2 people. Okay. 1,600 years later, we have a big flood, kills everybody, drowns everything. The world is still full of plants and animals, but still not full of people. Population grew to who knows what. Okay, this is my chart just guessing. There may have been 1 billion people. It might have been lots less. It might have been lots more. There's absolutely no way to tell that I can figure out. They probably had huge families, 100 or 200 children per family. No reason not to when you have infinite food supply. And you got the whole world. Matter of fact, it'd be an advantage to have a huge family to help, do the chores. But the lifespans before the flood were over 900 years. And during this time, probably had huge families and maybe a population of 1 billion, I don't know. But the purpose of the flood was to destroy man from off the earth. It says so in Genesis chapter 6. God said, I will destroy man. The Bible also says there were giants in the earth back in those days. Now let's just consider this as a possibility. Suppose Adam and Eve were 12 feet tall. Suppose everybody was 12 feet tall back then, okay? If we dig up the bones today, a fragment of a bone from somebody 12 feet tall, people who already have the evolution mindset already think that man started off small and he's getting bigger. Therefore, whatever this is, it can't be a giant human because we know man used to be smaller like a chimpanzee. So that's going to hinder their research. Giant bones have been found of humans, like the one the government of Turkey claims is from the grave of Noah. They think they found Noah's grave. He was about 12 feet tall, according to the officials over there in this town. Here's my reasons why I think so few human fossils have been found. Number 1, there were less people to be killed than there were animals. Number 2, people are smarter than animals, that is, some people, and would tend to avoid drowning until last, and so therefore they end up on top to rot instead of getting buried to fossilize. Question: how many buffalo were killed in the prairies over the last 200 years? Millions. Remember they tried to starve out the Indians by killing off the buffalo? Go find me 1 fossilized buffalo. You won't find any fossilized buffalo. Why not? Left on top. They didn't get buried. The only way an animal can fossilize, it has to be buried quickly in mud so that the bones can be preserved, and the buffalo were not buried quickly in mud. All fossils are testimony to a rapid burial, probably the worldwide flood in the days of Noah. Number 3, if humans were bigger, the bones may not be recognized as human due to the preconceived evolution worldview. I was in a debate with a former preacher turned atheist. It's debate number 7 of my series. And he said, where did Noah get the pitch to make the oil to make the pitch to coat the ark so it wouldn't leak? He said oil is made from things that drowned in the flood according to creationists, and so Noah can't get any pitch because Noah built the ark before the flood and there wasn't any oil. Well, first place, oil is made from all sorts of things. Okay, you can get oil from many, many sources. God told Noah in Genesis chapter 6, make thee an ark of gopher wood, room shalt thou make in it, and pitch it within and without with pitch. In Exodus chapter 2, Moses' sister and mother used pitch to daub the ark, so it would, the little bitty ark that Moses would put in so it wouldn't leak. In Isaiah 34, it talks about the streams thereof shall be turned into pitch, burning pitch. It shall not be quenched day nor night. The smoke thereof shall go up forever. Pitch, according to an old dictionary, is a thick, tenacious substance, the juice of a species of pine or fir, called whatever it is in Latin there. So pitch is made from the juice of a pine tree. Pitch is not made from oil. There were whole factories producing pitch just for the ship industries for hundreds of years before there ever was a commercial oil industry. Does anybody know when the first commercial oil well was drilled or where it was drilled? Pennsylvania, I think 1828. First oil well. Well, they had wooden ships a long time before that, didn't they? How did they waterproof them? With pitch. There were giant factories that all they would do is produce pitch to sell it, produce it from pine trees. Today, you take pine sap, you can boil it and get all sorts of different things. I mean, it's amazing the things can be made from the sap from different kinds of pine trees. Turpentine and stuff like that from pine. This is from Webster's 1828 dictionary. Talks about the pitch. He says, definition number 2, the resin of pine or turpentine inspissated, I forgot how to pronounce that word, I can't believe it. Anyway, it's used in caulking ships and paying the sides and bottom. So they had it back in 1828. Same year the first commercial oil well was drilled. I believe I'm correct on that. Okay, people say, was ancient man primitive? I don't think so. We've got a great book that we sell called The Puzzle of Ancient Man by Don Chittick, who's a creation speaker. There's his phone number right there if you want to call Don. He's put this together, a tremendous book of evidence of really advanced civilization. Like this little airplane found in a South American grave, probably about 1,000 years old. Smithsonian has it, and they have it labeled as a stylized insect. It doesn't look like a stylized insect, looks like an airplane to me. This book, Feats and Wisdom of the Ancients, Time Life magazine, page 19, shows an airplane found in a grave probably from about 2,100 years ago in an Egyptian tomb. This iron pot found in coal. No, ancient man was not primitive. Here are some giant stone blocks, 20,000 tons. The biggest crane on earth today can only lift 3,000 tons. This bell found inside a lump of coal. Ancient man was not primitive. They made all sorts of interesting artifacts a long time ago. A calculator, a computing device, an analog computer, found on board a ship that sank about 100 BC. Interesting. How did they know about analog computing 2,000 years ago? The iron hammer found that Carl Ball has in his museum, found in Texas, is very unusual metallurgy. They can't even make that today. This in Baghdad, Iraq, this battery was found in a city supposed to be 2,000 years old when they're digging it up. They knew about electricity a long time ago. World Explorer magazine has great articles. They're not Christian magazine by any means, but great articles about ancient people using electricity to light cities that they would build in caves and things like that. There's no smoke on the ceilings, and yet they did incredible artwork in there. They did brain surgery. Some skulls are found where they did brain surgery and the people healed, the hole healed over. This metallic sphere was found in South Africa. 3 parallel grooves going around the equator of the sphere. The problem is it was in Precambrian mineral, supposed to be 2.8 billion years old. Man didn't get here till about 1 or 2 million years ago. This is 2.8 billion. They found all sorts of these spheres in Africa. The article says South African miners have found hundreds of metallic spheres, at least one of which has 3 parallel grooves running around the equator. And there's all sorts of information about this. They said it cannot be scratched even by steel. Very hard. Mohs hardness scale named after Frederick Mohs, who chose 10 minerals as reference. 1 for diamond. Talc is the softest at 1. Diamond is the hardest at 10. And here these spheres are extremely hard, a kind of iron. Anyway, you can read all the article about that from Michael Cremo's book.
How big are they?
Oh, let's see. I think it mentions it here. If I recall, it's been about a year since I read the book. Michael Cremo is a Hindu, and he's got a great book called The Hidden History of the Human Race. It's in my library there, but he shows all sorts of evidence that ancient man had incredible knowledge, you know, things, metallurgy, stuff like that. And then, but he does believe the evolution teaching. So when they say this is Precambrian, he says, yep, this really is 2.8 billion years old. He believes that part of it, okay? That's where his mistake is. And then he'll say, see, This proves aliens visited the planet 2.8 billion years ago. That's the only way he can answer it. He wants to hang on to the dumb geologic column and do intelligent research and try to blend the two together. Well, if you get rid of the geologic column, it'd be the albatross you could cut off from around your neck, and it'd help you a lot in your research. Let's see. All about that thing. This mortar and pestle and a lot of very interesting tools were found in California gold mines. This is called the Coso artifact, found in 1961 in California, 4,300 feet above sea level. It's 340 feet above the dry Owens Lake, 6 miles north of Alancha, California. It looked like a geode, a small rock. When they cut it open, it appeared to look like a spark plug, porcelain inside, and a metallic wire down the middle, I believe. Here's some imaging of it. I don't know if it's X-ray imaging or whatever, but you can get the website members.nbci.com/logo72/harbinger11.htm and get information about this. Geologists think it's about 1,000 years old. Owens Lake was as high as the top of that peak. 1,000 years ago, Owens Lake was that high. Currently, no professional scientist has ever investigated the artifact. Even though it is found to be magnetic, it is quite similar technologically to a modern-day ceramic superconductor capacitor. Very interesting. These little spirals, it's called nanotechnology. These are extremely tiny. These are found all over Russia. Where is this? Brother, you're from Russia. Present report, Central Scientific Research Institute for Geology and Prospecting in Moscow. You've been to Moscow, right? ZNIGRI, probably the Russian initials for it, right? Yeah. Anyway, they've done studies on these things. Since 1991, more and more spiral-shaped objects have been found on the banks of the rivers Narada, Kozum, and whatever the other one is in eastern Ural Mountains. To date, these inexplicable artifacts have been found in their thousands at various sites near the rivers, and also by two smaller streams named, how would you pronounce that? VT, V-I-S-T, about a little past halfway down, two rivers. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Vritsi, yeah.
Vritsi? Mostly at depths between 3 and 12 meters, 10 and 40 feet. The size of these things range from a maximum of 1.2 inches, down to an incredible 0.003 millimeters, 1/10,000th of an inch. Exact measurements of these microscopically small objects have shown that the dimensions of the spirals are in the so-called golden mean ratio. Now the golden mean ratio, Jessica, make a note for me to get some more pictures of the golden mean ratio in here, because Walt Disney did a video years ago with Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, I think it was, in the golden mean ratio. It was incredible, showing how musical notes follow this ratio. If you take one number, well, there's several different patterns in mathematics that are fascinating, that are found all over in nature. But the Greeks knew about this golden mean ratio. They always made the height of their windows 1.6 more than the width. Take the width times 1.6, 1.61, it's a long number, but roughly 1.6. And it's very pleasing aesthetically to the eye. Even the Parthenon, if you look at the Parthenon, the height and width are this golden mean ratio. The distance between all the pillars and the height of the pillars is the golden mean ratio. You see it all through the Parthenon, just the way it's designed. And they've discovered it's very pleasing to the eye to see this particular ratio, okay? You can study more on that. There's lots of stuff. I'll just flash it up on the screen here quickly. This molybdenum, which is what is in tungsten, used in these little extremely tiny spirals, has a melting point of 4,740 degrees Fahrenheit. How did these people make these things? I suspect pre-flood man was not only much smarter, but had much better eyesight than we have. Probably would not need magnifying glass to see some really tiny things. Just much better eyesight. That's just my theory. I think you'll find all sorts of ancient artifacts that are, and ancient writings and artwork that is best explained by people having much better eyesight and much better night vision, being able to see in much darker places so they can do paintings and cave walls without lights. Okay. Get the website members.nbci.com/logo72, and you can get more on these little artifacts if you want more on that. This is from May 19th of 99. Okay, what about the Great Pyramid? I'm going to breeze over this quickly. I've covered everything I know about it on seminar part 7. I don't have a positive answer to this. There are a couple theories about the Great Pyramid. There are 67 pyramids. All of them, 66 of them, are copies of the Great Pyramid. Very amazing structure. All the rest of them are very inferior compared to the Great Pyramid. And all the rest of them are loaded with, hieroglyphics. This is from King Herman. He's the greatest guy that ever lived, etc., etc. The Great Pyramid has none of that. There are some people who think the Great Pyramid was built by godly people to be a testimony to the Lord. Other people think, no, it's the Pyramid of Cheops or Cheops, however you pronounce his name, and it's just a heathen king. Well, why there are no inscriptions in it, nobody's been able to answer, okay? It may just be an Egyptian building, or it might be that somebody built this to be a testimony to the Lord. All I do is present the theory as an option, okay? It says in Isaiah chapter 19, "In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord." There's a preacher in Georgia, I forgot his name right now. He's almost 80 years old, travels around and speaks a lot on the Great Pyramid. Not Vail. I'll think of it too late. Anyway, he has a great sermon he's preached many, many times on the Great Pyramid. He studied it carefully, and he says Egypt used to be 2 kingdoms, and the pyramid is right on the border between the 2 kingdoms, but once they join together, it's now in the midst. He said this is the only structure that's both in the midst and at the border, like the prophecy said. He said this prophecy is about the Great Pyramid, according to this preacher in Atlanta area. I'll think of his name. Okay. The Great Pyramid is a very unusual building. It is by far the largest building in the world. This is building number 1 when it comes to volume. If you got all the buildings in the world and put them in order of volume, biggest to smallest, Great Pyramid is number 1. Then you take building number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way to 100. The next 99 buildings in a row put together would not equal the size of this one. It is 480 feet tall, I think. Base is 13 acres. Absolutely monstrous building. About 480, I think. There have been many, many books written on this pyramid. What's that?
It's about 27 stories.
Yeah, 27, 28 stories. No, 480 feet, 48 stories. Figure 10 feet per story, roughly.
Yeah.
48 stories. Big building. Some of the stones in there weigh 70 tons. How you lift a 70-ton stone 400 feet off the ground, I don't know. If you notice this schematic of the Great Pyramid, you can walk in at the far right there, letter A, that's the door. The doorway was not even discovered until about the year 800. Grave robbers had gone in and opened up the other pyramids and stolen all the jewels out of all of them, but nobody could ever figure out how to get into this one. Even the oldest Egyptian records say, yep, there's a big pyramid out there and we don't know who built it. The sides of it were covered with smooth, polished casing stones. They fit together. They're 10 feet thick, these stones. That's 10 feet thick. Polished, so smooth, sometimes you couldn't even find the seams. You couldn't get a piece of paper between the seams. They fit together just that flawlessly. And it shined at noon. Of course, the light would shine off this thing and just glow like a big diamond sitting out there in the desert. And it might not have been a desert at the time it was built. Okay, we don't know. About 820 something, I forget the year, some guy decided he was going to hire some local people, and they can't find the door to get in the pyramid, so they're going to chip a hole in the side and just keep drilling until they find a passageway inside. So they're working on this for weeks and weeks, chiseling in this boiling hot conditions and inside a rock cave, you make it even hotter. Guys are miserable, they haven't found any gold yet. So they're digging and digging and digging. They're about to give up, and one of the guys heard something fall. He heard a hollow spot. So they chiseled that direction, found the channel, I think it was pathway number B going down, letter B there, and went into the pathway and found out that it was blocked by a big granite plug. So they had to chisel their way through the granite plug, had to work more weeks to cut their way through this thing. It's a long story how these guys did this. Finally, he knew the next morning, the guy in charge of this crew, they've been working for months now, knew we're going to get into the chamber tomorrow. And there better be some gold in there or these guys are going to kill me. So he went ahead, I think, if I have the story right, one night, broke through the final wall, went into the king's chamber, found nothing. And so he took some gold in there himself so the guys could find it the next day so they wouldn't kill him. That's a rough version of the story as I remember it. Anyway, if you go in the doorway to the Great Pyramid, you can go down to a place called the Pit, letter C. The broad way leads down to the pit. Or you can take the narrow way to the king's chamber. The broad way and the narrow way. Now that'll preach. Okay. As you go up into the king's chamber, you enter what's called the Grand Gallery. I'm going this next spring to tour the Great Pyramid, Lord willing. I'm going on a cruise, 10-day cruise. If you want to come along, you're welcome to come. It's like $2,500 or something. Get on our website and click on cruise. It's a 10-day cruise to Egypt, to Israel, to Greece, to Turkey, Patmos, all the cities, you know, mentioned, a lot of cities mentioned in the Bible. Cruise ship, I'm going to go around and see all those things, which I've never seen. The government will fund you. Tell the Marines you want to raise or something, right? Great Pyramid is very interesting. It was originally covered by 144,000 casing stones. That's an interesting number. The chief cornerstone, the very top of the building, was never put in place. Giant building, the top stone was never installed. One rock short of finishing. Why? Nobody knows. Okay? It is 90 times the volume of the Sears Tower. Absolutely massive building. There are many who go around preaching, and I don't know if they're right or not. I don't know. They say that the pyramid inch is the symbol to interpret this thing, and you can measure up this grand gallery, and there are marks along the wall from major world events. World War I's on there. World War II's on there. And they say it's all symbolic of the whole future, and God apparently gave all this revelation to whoever built it. Some have argued it was Adam. Some have argued it was Noah, who built it after the flood. He did live a long time after the flood. You know, what did he do? I don't know. Some argued that it was Enoch before the flood, and that because it was sealed, it survived the flood. I don't know, okay? Hank Hanegraaff has blasted me 3 times on his program for even mentioning the Great Pyramid. He thinks it's nothing but a big, you know, Egyptian building. And so, Hank, you can believe whatever you want. He says, Hovind teaches pyramidology. I do not teach pyramidology. I don't know. I think it's an interesting study. If you want to study it, enjoy yourself, okay? I've read many books on it, and I don't know the answer. But the Bible says in Revelation, there are going to be 144,000 Jews get saved during the tribulation. Very interesting. Okay. Inside the Great Pyramid, you will find the king's chamber. There's an empty tomb in there, which I've been told is the same volume as the Ark of the Covenant. No body or evidence of any body has ever been found in there. Empty tomb. The top stone was never installed. Very interesting symbolism here, if it is indeed something to be a testimony to be the Bible in stone, for instance. The Bible says Jesus Christ is the head of the corner. Those people who believe in pyramidology have said Jesus Christ is the chief cornerstone. He's the stone the builders rejected. By the way, the cornerstone on the pyramid would have 5 sides, which is the number of grace. And the cornerstone for a building like that is 100% in the way until the building is done. You can't set anything on it. You can't use it as a work table. I mean, it comes to one point. Where do you park it? It's nothing but in the way. Nobody wants it around until the building's done, and then it's time to put the cornerstone. Just like the world today is, Jesus is in their way. Okay? But if he is the chief cornerstone, if his symbolism goes to the pyramid, then he will come back and finish the job. It's also very interesting that the book of Daniel talks about the stone cut out of the mountain without hands, smote the image on the feet, and made the grew to be a great mountain. Noah Hutchings has a good book on the Great Pyramid. If you want more on that, I recommend you read this book from Southwest Radio Church. And if you get on my seminar notebook, which you should have, the pages with all the recommended reading, there's a whole section on the Great Pyramid. Some of the books written there are written by Jehovah's Witnesses. They've studied the Great Pyramid a lot. They think it's all got a lot of good symbolism in it. Mormons have spent some time working on this. So I can't vouch for anybody's doctrine. I'm just saying it's an interesting study. Read it for yourself. The occult symbol on the back of our dollar bill shows the Great Pyramid. Behind the pyramid, you see there is nothing, representing the world before the New World Order, where it's just desert, And on the front of the pyramid, there are some things growing, representing they're going to bring life into the world. This is the New World Order idiots who think they're going to control the world. I've been told the eye on top is supposed to represent Lucifer, the light bearer. It is the right eye of a person. All this is supposed to be symbolic of something. Study it for yourself, see what you think. Okay, a couple more questions here and we'll take a break. Was the earth ever hot molten mass? No. Textbooks teach the earth formed and it was hot like the moon. That is absolutely scientifically impossible. The Bible says God created the earth under water. Here we have a clear conflict. Somebody's wrong. Textbook says the earth started off hot and cooled down. God said it started off cool. Never was a hot molten mass. So, how do you tell who's right? Well, Robert Gentry has a website, halos.com, excellent material on radiopolonium halos, which we cover on video number 7 of our series in about as much detail as I know. I can't add much to that. But these little polonium halos are found in granite rocks all over the world. I went to meet with Robert Gentry, 99, I believe, year 2000, March of 2000. I went into his laboratory and saw the radiopolonium halos for myself through his microscope. Very interesting. These little polonium halos, polonium is a radioactive element like uranium, potassium, and it blows up like a hand grenade. Fragments fly off. But they fly a certain distance. It's like if you exploded a hand grenade underwater, fragments would fly a certain distance, and then they would all fall to the bottom of the pond or lake. When they shoot fireworks, 4th of July, goes up, the fragments fly out, makes a sphere, everybody goes, wow, yay, and then they all fall down, right? Suppose I said, Jeff, I want you to launch some fireworks, explode a sphere, and freeze the sphere in place. That'd be tough to do, right? These little polonium atoms are breaking down, radiometric decay, and the fragments fly out into the granite, a certain distance. I mean, we're talking microscopic, okay? It makes a little ring, a sphere. If the rock were hot, the sphere would, and then decay, be gone. Like they can't hold it in the atmosphere of water because it's liquid. Molten rock would not hold these spheres. Polonium halos are proof positive the earth was never a hot molten mass. And you can get Robert Gentry's book or get on halos.com if you want more information on that. Okay, what about global warming? How many of you have heard the earth is warming up and we need more government regulations? Of course, you know, bigger government will fix the problem. You're right. Show me any problem bigger government has fixed other than more jobs for those who can't get a regular job. There's a good book on this topic. I don't sell the book. Derry Brownfield did not write it, but Derry Brownfield's a friend of mine in Centralia, Missouri, I believe is the name of the city. Tremendous guy, great radio host, has a radio program, Common Sense for America or something like that. Common Sense Coalition, that's it. Here's his phone number. Call Derry and get this book, Facts Not Fear. Marilyn Quayle is one of the people who's endorsed this book and written a foreword to it. This teaches all about the environment and what's really going on. The people that are most worried about global warming are the ones that live near the beach. Because if the earth warmed up, the ice caps would melt back, raising the ocean. If the earth warmed up a couple of degrees and some more ice melted at the North Pole and South Pole and the oceans came up 50 feet, that'd be great. I'm 60 feet above sea level right here. I'd have beachfront property. Right? That's basically what would happen. And they're using the environmental movement to bring in Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, plank number 1, abolish private property. The environmental movement is really a smokescreen to cover the advance of communism. They want to control your property. We covered some of that earlier on one of our previous series. Okay, Green River Formation. You will certainly get this if you get into a debate on evolution. I get this just about every week. They'll say, we know the earth is millions of years old because of the Green River Formation. You say, what on earth is that? Well, there's a place in Wyoming and Montana, I believe it's mostly Wyoming, if I recall, called the Green River Formation. It's a layer of rock, okay? But this rock, this strata, has millions of very thin lines. And they analyze these lines and say, you know what, this is different kinds of pollen in these lines. Some of this pollen is only produced in the spring and some is only produced in the fall. So each line represents spring and fall, spring and fall, spring and fall. So these become annual rings. And since there are millions of them, that proves the Earth is millions of years old. That's the way the logic goes. Same thing with the ice rings. Remember that? We covered the ice rings at Greenland. Okay? Well, as they dig down through the Green River Formation, they found layers of ash. A volcano blew up, spread a layer of ash everywhere. That's called an event horizon. We covered that last week, I believe. You dig down a little further, you find another event horizon. Volcano blew up another time, left a layer of ash behind. In between those ash layers, there are layers of this rock. Thousands and thousands of little thin lines. And they'll say, see, each one is a year. So this took, millions of years to form the Green River Formation. If you get those things at the store that have two pieces of glass with a different colored sand and you flip it over, and it always makes the little lines down there. How many have seen those before? The Green River Formation has millions of these lines, no question. But that doesn't prove it took millions of years. You can take a rock from Green River Formation, grind it up to powder, and pour it back into moving water. It'll separate again into thousands of little layers. All those layers form quickly in one big flood in the days of Noah. Creation Magazine had an article about that some time ago that was really excellent on Green River Formation. Paul Gardner, a geologist in European creation geological circles, had written an article about it. He said between two different ash layers, event horizons, the number of layers varies by as much as 35%. So they can't be annual rings. This is proof positive of that. How many have heard about man finding evidence of life on Mars? You ever heard about that? From the Mars rock. Yeah. Well, let's tell you what they found, and we'll take our break here. This article in the newspaper said, are we really Martians? Astronomers say life here could have come from Mars. Can you believe they cut down a tree to make a newspaper to print this junk? They killed a tree to say that. I mean, come on. This guy is insane, okay? Anybody who wants to believe that is welcome to believe it, I suppose, but that's not common sense. That's not science. Here's the story. The Mars lander sampled Martian soil. Sophisticated tests performed on the samples did not even find a trace of a germ. No evidence of any life on Mars. Here's the rock that the big deal was about. This rock, ALH 84001, is in storage, I'm sure, behind a locked vault where nobody can touch this thing. When they looked at the rock under the microscope, they found this little wiggly line. See that line coming across the center of the screen right there like a worm? They said, there it is, folks. Proof there was life on Mars. Now, let's stop and think about this. They find this rock in Antarctica near the South Pole. They find a line on it. They say, this proves there's life on Mars. Anybody see a problem with the steps of logic here? Here's what really happened, okay? Mars is a long ways from the Earth. The closest it ever gets is 0.5 astronomical units. That's about 46 million miles. That's the closest it ever gets. You think something hit Mars hard enough to knock a piece off so it could fly over to Earth, land on the Earth, and still show evidence of bacteria on this rock? Don't you think getting hit hard enough to be blasted off that far would heat the rock and destroy any evidence of any bacteria? Don't you think re-entry into Earth's atmosphere would heat it up and destroy any evidence of bacteria? Don't you think sitting there in Antarctica for thousands of years would give it a chance of getting contaminated with bacteria? What really happened is, they claim it came from Mars. There's no proof of that. They claim it broke off 16 million years ago and landed 13,000 years ago. I'd like to know what the bacteria ate for all that time. How did it survive the impact, the vacuum of space, the entry, the freezing for 13,000 years? NASA did the research. It's very interesting. At the same time they did this research, the NASA grant money was stalled in Congress. Congress was not going to vote to spend the billions of dollars for NASA. NASA scientists said, by the way, we have to find something, we got to find something to make us worthwhile. That rock had been sitting in a closet for 7 years. They had the rock from a long time ago. They drew the rock out and said, wow, look at this. We found evidence of life on Mars. You better get our money out of Congress so we can keep studying this. As soon as the grant money was released, and it was shortly thereafter, they said, oops, it's not really a bacteria. It's actually a carbonate crystal. It's a natural formation. No life on Mars. Sorry, we'll keep looking. Well, what about giving back our grant money? Oh no, we got to keep that now because we got to keep looking. So all this was a hoax to support the evolution theory and to get their grant money through Congress. All right? Bible says Eve is the mother of all living, so I don't think there's life on other planets. There might be, but I doubt it. Nobody's proven any at all. Okay, come back from the break. We'll talk about theistic evolution. Is that a reasonable alternative? Coming up next. All right, let's talk about theistic evolution. A theist is a person who believes in God. So theistic evolution would be the idea that maybe God made the world using evolution to do it. These are the people who try to put the two together. They want to believe in evolution, but they want to believe God did it that way. Well, numerous problems with theistic evolution. Don Boys, a friend of mine in Chattanooga, Ringgold, Georgia actually, he said theistic evolution is like trying to ride two horses at the same time when the horses are going in opposite directions. Can't do it. Hugh Ross, of course, one of the most famous, he would claim he is not a theistic evolutionist, but he does believe an awful lot of the tenets of evolution. And I've got material on that. Okay. Why do some people believe this? I don't know how anybody can say the Bible teaches theistic evolution. Couldn't God have used evolution to make the universe? No. Unless that depends on what you mean by God. If you mean the God of the Bible, absolutely not. If you have a different God, well then certainly your God you can believe any kind of God you want. Number one, I would say it's not the clear teaching of the Bible. If you just read the Bible, you will never put evolution into that. Jacques Monod, a Nobel Prize winner, said, he was commenting on theistic evolution. He stated, natural selection is the blindest, most cruel way of evolving new species and more complex and refined organisms. The struggle for life and elimination of the weakest is a horrible process against which our whole modern ethics revolts. An ideal society is a non-selective society, one where the weak is protected. That is exactly the reverse of the so-called natural law. I'm surprised that a Christian would defend the idea that this is the process which God more or less set up in order to have evolution. There's an evolutionist who says, why do some people believe God would use this cruel process? Evolution is cruel. Is that the way God did it? Philosopher David Hull, Northwestern University, said, whatever the God implied by evolutionary theory and the data of natural history may be like, he is not the Protestant God of waste not, want not. He is also not a loving God who cares about his productions. He is not even the awful God portrayed in the book of Job. The God of Galapagos is careless, wasteful, indifferent, almost diabolical. He is certainly not the sort of God to whom anyone would be inclined to pray. If God used evolution, would you want to worship a God like that? The Bible says the worlds were framed by the Word of God. God created it. God makes things perfect. He did it in 6 days, according to Exodus 20:11. It's real clear. He made it in 6 days, and he rested the seventh day. His works were finished after 6 days. It's not a continuing process of evolution. God finished it in 6 days. It's been falling apart since then because of the effects of man's sin, apparently. But in Hebrews 4, it tells us God rests the seventh day from all his works. So it's not a long, ongoing process. He ended his work, tells us in Genesis chapter 2. He's done. So no, the clear teaching of the Bible is not evolution. The Bible says death came into the world by sin. You know, why do we have death in the world? Because of man's sin. If theistic evolution is true, then death was already here before man even arrived. So now you have death before sin. Very serious problem. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians, by man came death. In Adam all die. The reason we have death in the world is because of Adam's sin. Okay, and then we get into the gap theory. Not true, not Scripture. We covered that on video number 2. The Bible says God made man in His image. And He made Eve, He made Adam from the dust of the ground. He made Eve from a rib. He didn't have a long, slow process of slowly letting them come from an ape-like creature. I think a person who believes in theistic evolution has a retarded God that can't make it right first time. It's not the God of the Bible. Your God is stupid. You need to trade Him in for a real God. Okay? God who can make it right. The Bible says God's work is perfect. So, it's not the character of God to use misfits and death to accomplish His goals. God makes things perfect. Darwin's philosophy was, the way you get ahead is by war, nature, war of nature, from famine, from death. He said that's the most, from these things, the most exalted object we are capable of conceiving, the production of higher animals, directly follows. Now wait a minute. Is that how we get ahead? From war, suffering, death, misfits, famine? No, Charlie. God made a perfect world and man's sin messed it up. So theistic evolution would certainly nullify the need for the death of Christ, since Adam died and brought death into the sinned and brought death into the world, and Christ died to redeem us. You have a serious theological problem. There's no evidence of evolution anyway. So why should we compromise a perfectly good Bible with a dumb theory like evolution? See, the Bible's never been proven wrong in any way. Evolution's never been proven right in any way. Why some Christians are out there trying to blend the two absolutely blows my mind. Okay, next question. Didn't the Pope accept evolution? Yeah, several popes have accepted evolution. So what? I wouldn't believe anything the Pope said anyway, okay? I've only been able to find this from one source. I've had several other people say yes, they think it's true, but I haven't documented it yet because history gets rewritten over the years. But here is what William Cooper said in his book, Behold a Pale Horse. Very fascinating story. He said, during World War II, a Polish salesman working for IG Farben Chemical Company sold cyanide, Zyklon B, and Malthion to the Nazis to help exterminate the Jews at Auschwitz. After the war, he feared for his life, so he joined the Catholic Church and became a priest. 1946. 1958, he was ordained as Poland's youngest bishop. After 30 days, the reigning pope was assassinated, and he became Pope John Paul III. Very interesting story. I cannot document that it's true. The Pope right now is apparently the former cyanide salesman that ran for his life from the Nazis. What better place to hide than in plain sight? The dragon on a large, this is the crest in the Vatican Museum that the Pope, you know, one of the symbols of the Pope. Vatus is from the word diviner. Can from serpent. Vatican means the divining serpent. The Catholic Church, and there's an awful lot of good people that are just duped by that religion. Catholicism is an evil, wicked philosophy that is not Christian. Okay? And they need to get out of that. They're wolf in sheep's clothing. My humble, unbiased opinion. Okay. Are there contradictions in the Bible? Well, let's discuss the question here. Bible says the Word of God is our sword, and Bible says it's pure. Do we have any contradictions in the Bible? It depends which version of the Bible you're using. Okay? I think I can point out some very obvious contradictions in many versions, and I'll do that here in a moment. I've been unable to find any contradictions in the King James. If you think you know of one, please let me know, and I'll try to research it. Okay? I've not seen any. I get a lot of them sent to me, and I'm able to find an answer or find somebody else who has an answer to just about to everyone so far. Here's the one that almost got me as a new Christian. I was just saved a few months, and a liberal Methodist church camp counselor told me there were contradictions in the Bible, and he just about destroyed my faith. He showed me Genesis chapter 1, where it says God made the trees on the third day. Turn to chapter 1, verse 20, and it says on day 5, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl. He said, Kent, when did God make the trees? I said, day 3. He said, when did he make the birds? I said, day 5. He said, what did he make the birds out of? I said, he made them out of water. Let the waters bring forth the birds. Okay? Adam was made from dust. Eve is made from a rib. Birds are made from water. That's what it says here, okay? Day 6, starting in Genesis 1:24. God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, and cattle, etc., etc. Then in verse 26, God said, let us make man in our image. He said, Kent, 2 questions here. What did he make the animals out of? I said, well, it looks like he made the animals out of the earth, out of the ground. He said, okay. Did he make the animals before man or after man? I said, he made the animals first and then he made man. The guy said, that's exactly right. Now turn to chapter 2 and I'll show you a contradiction. Every debate I've done where we get into the question of contradictions, this one comes up without fail. Chapter 2. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree. He said, wait a minute, stop right there. Here we got a contradiction. Chapter 1 has trees made first and then man. Chapter 2 has man made first and then trees. Contradiction. Turn to chapter 2, verse 18. And the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him an help meet for him. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air. He said, well, here we have 2 contradictions. Animals are being made after man in chapter 2, and the fowl are being made out of the ground, whereas in chapter 1 the fowl are made out of the water. He said, contradiction. Several contradictions. So here's the supposed contradictions. Chapter 1 has the grass and trees made on day 3. Chapter 2 has the plants and grass made after man on day 6. Chapter 1 has the birds made out of the water on day 5. Chapter 2 has the birds made out of the ground on day 6. Chapter 1 has animals made before man on day 6. Chapter 2 has the animals made after man on day 6. He said, Kent, the Bible's a good book, but it has contradictions in it. You've heard that story before, right? Well, let's just see the truth to all this. Here's what I think happened. On day 3, God made the plants. On day 5, he made the birds out of the water. On day 6, he made animals. And then he made man. And then he made a garden. Then he put the man in the garden. And in the garden, he made the trees that were good for food. And he made one more of each animal so that Adam could name them and select a wife. So while Adam is standing there in what's going to be the Garden of Eden, the rest of the world is already full of animals and already full of plants. God's going to do some more creating, still on day 6, no contradiction with Exodus 20:11. God's going to make some more trees just so Adam can see that God is the one who's doing it. And he's going to make some more animals, again, so Adam can see God did it, and so Adam can select a wife. So up out of the ground came giraffe. Adam said giraffe. No thanks. Up came elephant. He said elephant. No thanks. Nice animal, but I don't want to marry it. And so one by one, Adam named each of the animals and rejected them as a wife. And that's when the Lord said, Adam, you go to sleep, son. I got a surprise for you when you wake up. And so he took one small part and made the world's first loudspeaker. Made the first woman. So that's the sequence of events. It is not a contradiction at all. It's interesting. What is the only thing in the world at this time that did not see God create anything? Eve. If Eve was the last thing made, she didn't see anything get made. Who did Satan go to tempt? Eve. The Bible says she's the weaker vessel. The Bible says in 1 Timothy, Eve was deceived, Adam was not deceived. He knew full well what he was doing when he ate that banana or whatever it was, okay? I don't know if it was an apple. Somebody said, did Adam and Eve have a date? Probably an apple, we don't know. But Eve was the one who didn't get to see anything created. She was deceived. Adam knew full well, if I don't take this thing, God's going to judge her. And I love my wife, so I'm going to become sin for her, just like Christ became sin for us to save us. Great symbolism there. Okay. 2 Chronicles chapter 4 tells us Solomon made a molten sea, big brass bowl, 10 cubits from brim to brim. That's 15 feet across. This is a big bowl. Okay. 5 cubits high, about 7.5 feet high, and a line of 30 cubits did compass it about. I read that when I was a young Christian and thought, wait a minute, this is not right. If you find the circumference of a circle, you take the diameter times pi, which is 3.14159.265. It goes forever. Nobody's ever found the end of it. Some Japanese guy figured it to 700 decimal places or something. Who cares, all right? 3.14 is close enough for most calculations, but the diameter times pi should give you 31.5 cubits around, roughly. But even that would be an average. So if the circle was 10 cubits across, it would be mathematically incorrect to say it's 30 cubits around. And yet in 2 Chronicles it says the molten sea was 10 cubits from brim to brim and 30 cubits around. So is this a contradiction? No. If you keep reading the story, you'll find out the thickness of it was in hand breadth. It's a lot of brass. It's a big bowl. It's real thick. Okay? Here's my theory. The 10 cubits is outside to outside. The 30 cubits around is the inside circumference. You need the outside diameter to get the thing through a doorway, but you don't care how thick the brass is when it comes to figuring the volume of water or whatever you're going to put in it. You would need the inside circumference. And so I did a study as a young Christian. I was studying math and science and always interested in the topic. So I would ask everybody, hey, let me measure your cubit. You know, put their elbow on the table, measure the height of their cubit, measure their hand breadth. And I figured, make a note for me to put the formula on here to calculate backwards. It's found in the seminar notebook to put on slide number 316. If you subtract 2 hand breadths and calculate backwards, you get a value of pi 3.14159. Try it sometime. Take 10 of your cubits, mine's 21 inches. Okay? I'll get the formula up there. And you can figure backwards and find your hand breadth, 2 hand breadths. So it's not a contradiction at all. Okay, if you have your Bibles, check this one out. 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 26. How many horses did Solomon have for his chariots anyway? Skeptics will say, see, there's a contradiction in the Bible. Even Henry Morris in his Defender's Bible says there's a copyist error right here. He won't say it's a contradiction. He says it's a copyist error. I disagree, Henry, and I told him so. He's a great man. I still sell his Bible and highly recommend it. However, we put a little disclaimer with ours, the ones that we sell, saying, sorry, he's got a few mistakes in there. 1 Kings chapter 4 says Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. When you look at the same story in 2 Chronicles chapter 9, it says Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Well, now, did he have 40,000 or did he have 4,000? Is this a contradiction in the Bible? 1 Kings 4, Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. 2 Chronicles 9, Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Well, they both agree there were 12,000 horsemen. There's no question from reading the whole chapter. This is 2 authors telling the same story. Why the difference? Well, it's not a contradiction at all. It's exactly correct. And it's teaching us some very interesting things about Roman and ancient Israeli warfare. The verse on top, 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots. Does that verse tell me how many chariots he had? No. That tells me how many horses he had for his chariots, right? Look at 2 Chronicles. Solomon had 4,000 stalls, 4 horses, and chariots. See that word "and" in there? This one tells me how many chariots he had, doesn't it? If he had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, and 40,000 stalls for horses, for the chariots, well, guess what? He had 10 horses per chariot, didn't he? That's common sense in case you get a flat tire, you know. The horses get shot as much as the people do. I mean, those arrows are flying like mad over there. So, no, it's not a contradiction at all. For 2 Samuel chapter 10. And the Syrians fled before Israel, and David slew the men of 700 chariots of the Syrians. 1 Chronicles. But the Syrians fled before Israel, and David slew of the Syrians 7,000 men which fought in chariots. Do we have a contradiction here? Second Samuel says David slew the men of 700 chariots. First Chronicles said he slew of the Syrians 7,000 men which fought in chariots. Some people say, well, it's just a copyist error, because in the Hebrew, if you make a little dot over the number, it means 1,000 or something, you know, it adds another 0. Don't give me all that stuff, okay? I think God can preserve His Word just fine in English, so I can have a copy too. All right? I don't speak Hebrew or Greek. What's that?
There's 10 men in each chariot.
There's 10 men in each chariot. Not a big deal. If he slew the men of 700 chariots, how many men would he slay? 7,000 men, which fought in chariots. Right? See, the chariot's like the tank. You have to have extra crews waiting on the sidelines. Somebody gets wounded, bring them out, load a new guy in there, take off again. Hook up a new horse, take off again. Not a contradiction at all. Now, many new versions of the Bible have tried to fix what they thought was a contradiction, and they messed it up by trying to fix it. I'll show you. Here's the NIV. Solomon had 4,000 stalls, 4 chariot horses, and 12,000 horses. Wait a minute, it should have been horsemen, right? Second Chronicles says Solomon had 4,000 stalls, 4 horses, and chariots. Well, if he had 4,000 stalls for chariot horses in the top one, and 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, this is simply not correct. It should be 10 horses per chariot. New American Standard got it right. 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots in the one, and 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots. So they got it right. New Revised Standard Version got it wrong. They said Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Next one says he had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots and 12,000 horses. NIV got it wrong. And David killed 700 of their charioteers and 40,000 of their foot soldiers. First Chronicles says David killed 7,000 of their charioteers and 40,000 of their foot soldiers. Now, if you were going to defend the NIV in a debate against an atheist, and he pointed out this contradiction, what could you possibly say? I'm sorry, you have a contradiction. Yeah, this is a contradiction. There's no way around this one. It's wrong. New Revised Standard got part of it right and part of it wrong. David killed, of the Armenians, 700 chariot teams and 40,000 horsemen. Next one says David killed 7,000 Armenian charioteers, so that would be right, and 40,000 foot soldiers. Well, did he kill foot soldiers or horsemen? The 40,000 they got the first part right and the second part wrong. Everybody's trying to help God out by fixing His Word. Just leave it alone. It's doing fine. The book that we sell by Peter Ruckman is an excellent book. He's rude and crude and crass and all that stuff, but it really is a good book on the supposed errors in the King James Bible. He defends over 500 of them and shows, they are not errors. And some have said, well, in Leviticus it says the coney, the rabbit, chews the cud, and rabbits don't chew the cud. So the Bible has a contradiction. No, come on now. Rabbits eat their food, digest it partially, expel it as waste, and then eat it again. Check it out with a book on rabbits. They do indeed Go through their food one more time. So, yes, they do the effect of chew the cud. Okay. Isn't Easter an error in Acts chapter 12, verse 4? Shouldn't Pascha be Passover? You can get any version of the Bible you want. Look up Acts 12:4. It'll say Passover. King James says Easter. The only one that says Easter. Let's read the story. Acts 12, verse 1. Now about that time Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church, and he killed James the brother of John with the sword. And because it saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison, and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Almost all Bible critics will say, King James has a mistake right here, because nobody celebrated Easter for a few hundred years later. And there are 29 times where the word Pascha is used in the New Testament, or Pascha, whatever it is, and it's always translated Passover. And that's correct. It's translated Passover in every case, except right here. They chose the word Easter. Is this a mistake? Well, let's just go look at the Passover. Exodus 12. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. This shall be the first month of the year to you. This is April, okay? Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month, April 10th, they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. If the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto him take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year, etc., etc. Ye shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. So the 10th day of April, they get the lamb. On the 14th day, they're going to kill it. Put the blood on the side posts and the top of the door, which, by the way, is very interesting. If you go outside your house and put the blood on the top and then put the blood on the 2 side posts, you make a cross. Blood on the top, blood on the 2 side posts. Interesting bit of trivia. That one's free. Okay. And they shall eat the flesh in that night. So, first Passover was at night, not an Easter sunrise service. Okay, it was at night, not in the morning. Unleavened bread, bitter herbs, eat it raw. Thou shalt not eat it raw, nor sodden it all with water, but roast with fire, etc., etc. Okay. It is the Lord's Passover. So the Bible tells us very clearly in Exodus chapter 12, the Lord's Passover was the 14th of April, first month. Verse 14, And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses, for whosoever eateth leaven from the first day shall be cut off. And we can read all this passage here. So here in Exodus 12 it tells us in verse 18, In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at even, not a sunrise service, ye shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even. So they celebrate the Passover, then 7 days of eating unleavened bread. Anybody confused yet? Numbers tells us, And in the 14th day of the first month is the Passover of the Lord. And in the 15th day of this month is the feast. 7 days shall unleavened bread be eaten. You got to get this now. Passover on the 14th, and then 7 days of unleavened bread. Passover was at night, April 14th. 7 days of unleavened bread always followed the Passover. The pagan festival of Astar, or Ishtar, or Easter. Easter is a pagan festival. Was always held late in April to celebrate the earth regenerating itself after winter. The rebirth of the earth, because the things are going to start growing again. That's why they use rabbits, Playboy magazine, and eggs, Easter bunny, It's all pagan holiday, pagan symbolism. Those are symbols of fertility. The feast days are never called Passover anywhere in Scripture. Peter was arrested during the days of unleavened bread. Isn't that what it said back in Acts chapter 4? Then were the days of unleavened bread. So if Peter's arrested during the days of unleavened bread, Passover's already gone, isn't it? Herod wanted to kill him during his own pagan festival of Easter, which was coming up in a few days. King James is the only version to get it right. Check out all the other versions. They all say Herod arrested him during the days of unleavened bread, intending after Passover to kill him. Oh, man, wrong. Sorry. Got a mistake. One atheist said, well, the Bible says in Genesis 10 that God divided the languages up, Tower of Babel, Genesis 10. When you come to chapter 11, it says the whole earth was of one language. You see, there's a contradiction. I thought God divided the language, and here it says it's all one language. Well, duh. This is so silly. Chapter 11 is going to go back and retell the story, put it in encapsulated form. It's like reading a newspaper. You pick up the headlines. 50 people killed in bus crash. Wow. So you read the story. The bus was southbound on Main Street. Wait a minute. I thought 50 people were killed in a crash. How can the bus be southbound on Main Street? Well, duh, they're telling the details now, okay? First they give you the headline, and now they go back to fill in the story. That's all it is between chapter 10 and chapter 11. How many died in the plague? In Numbers chapter 25, it says those that died in the plague were 20 and 4,000. That's Old English way of saying 24,000. When you read the same story in 1 Corinthians, it says, neither let us commit fornication as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. Is there a contradiction here? Did 24,000 die in the plague, or did 23,000 die in the plague? Who's got an answer to that one? 23,000 died in one day. Does this tell us they all died in one day, back in Numbers? How many died in the plague? 24,000. 23,000 died one day. Guess what? 1,000 died the next day. Not too complicated to figure out, is it? No, there are no contradictions at all. Okay. I get into the question of why do we use the King James versus other versions, and we can go for hours and hours on that. I won't take time to cover all that now. I do cover that on my video number 7, Q&A, about the Textus Receptus versus the Alexandrian manuscripts. There's a family of manuscripts. I'll just give you a brief synopsis here. When the Bible was first written, they're writing the Bible on this parchment or paper or whatever, and they roll it up in scroll form, though there were sometimes they used book forms even back then, in shape of a book. Every morning they would unroll this scroll and make a copy, work on copying it, writing it out. You can only roll it and unroll it so many times, and pretty soon it gets brittle and it begins to crack, and pretty soon it falls apart. After a few hundred years, it's trash. If I come to Jessica, one of our secretaries here, and I have a note, here, Jessica, I want you to do this and do this and do this. Here's a list of things. Send this message to pastor in Oregon. Do this. I hand her this piece of paper. She takes the paper, types out my message, prints it out on letterhead, and sends it. What is she going to do with this paper? Throw it away. The message is what's important, not the paper it's written on, right? God told his prophets what to write. They wrote it down. Then people took and copied those writings. And after a few hundred years, they maybe had a few hundred copies. They would check these copies very carefully. If you find a mistake, you fix it or burn it, throw it away. Okay, no mistakes allowed. These guys were real careful in their copying system. The church gets persecuted, so they each take their copies and they spread out. Some go to Russia, some go to Germany, some go to Italy. They spread out. The Christians spread out around the world. They're still busy copying their scrolls. But now, these scrolls have no contact with each other. The Russian ones are being copied and copied and copied, and the ones that this is basically the Jews doing this, okay, or not the Jews, the Christians doing this in these countries. And every country has their own, most countries have their own set of these copies of the original. The original gets worn out, doesn't matter, burn it, we don't need it anymore, we've got 500 copies. So the original shot, who cares? These scrolls are separated from each other for hundreds of years. Meanwhile, about 200 or 300 years after Christ, there's a bunch of folks down in Alexandria, Egypt. Make a note for me to put a map, Jessica, right in here of Alexandria. This is in northern Egypt. It used to be a major trade city, sort of like, you know, New York or Harvard University in Boston or something like that. Okay? This was the learning center of the world. A group of folks who wanted to claim to be Christians, but were really basically a cult, sort of like Jehovah's Witnesses. They want everybody to think, oh, we're Christians like you are. No, you're not either. Okay? You believe all kinds of weird stuff, and you're not a Christian. But they wanted to claim to be Christians, but they did not believe in the deity of Christ. They believed in all sorts of strange doctrines. So they made their own copy of the scrolls. As they're copying, they make a few changes. For instance, when the Bible says, Lord Jesus Christ, they just said Jesus in many instances. Now, if you're going to make a counterfeit $20 bill, you don't put Mickey Mouse's picture on it. Okay, you want to get as close as possible so nobody spots your counterfeit. So they made many changes, as many as they thought they dared, without people recognizing it, you know, as an obvious fraud. Well, the New Testament church caught this and said, no, this is baloney. This is a lousy manuscript. This is no good. We'll stick with our originals. So they're busy copying their originals, wearing them out. Meanwhile, the Alexandrian manuscript is, a few copies are made, 20 or 30, I don't know. And the cult eventually dies out. So the scrolls get stuck in a vase, someplace, a jar, you know, and nobody uses them. They're copying and copying and copying and copying for hundreds of years, the Bible, wearing out the originals. After they're all worn out, you throw them away. Now you've got exact copies. They've all been checked, certified, verified, you know, tested, etc. You come to the year 1400, and somebody starts to gather together these different manuscripts from different countries and to get a collection of all the manuscripts, and he's going to put it in English. So we get the Tyndale Bible, the Wycliffe Bible, the King James Bible, all 1400, 1500, 1600 during this time frame. Everybody's happy. Wow, we got a great version of the Bible. You know, we've translated it. They found 5,000 copies of these, of the Bible. Sometimes the entire Bible, sometimes fragments. Couldn't find any differences between them except spelling changes. Sometimes Pedro and Peter, you know, same guy, obviously different spelling. Okay. So they get these 5,000 manuscripts, compare them all, and say, wow, look at this. They've been separated in these different countries for hundreds of years, copies after copies after copies, and they still say the same thing. Proof that God has preserved it. So they translate all this to English. Then along comes Westcott and Hort, two perverts in the early 1800s, and they got the old Alexandrian manuscript and said, hey, this is older. And it was. Therefore, it's better. Right there's the mistake. Yes, it's older, but it's older because it's worse. Nobody wanted to use it. And so they translated this, they made their own Greek version of the New Testament based on the Alexandrian and made an English translation. And every one of the new modern translations is an English translation of the Alexandrian manuscript. There are many times verses are left out. The great book, New Age Bible Versions, you can get it from avpublications.com, which actually shows you the comparison of all the different versions. Here's King James, here's New American Standard, etc., etc. I've got 30 or 40 translations in my office there. Now you can stop and take a look at that. Okay, next week we'll start off on what's on our seminar part 7B, the last half of our seminar. More questions and answers. We have 2 weeks to try to finish everything. Good luck. See you next week. Thank you.